Chapter 1441 Collapse. Chapter 1441 Collapse. Dead silent. The entire universe was dead silent. The countless universe god from He Longshan stared at demon-like Jian Wushuang, whose hands were covered with fresh blood. Everyone shivered in fear from the bottom of their hearts. Too strong. Demon, he's a demon. Such a demon, how could we match him evenly? The universe gods from He Longshan shouted. They saw the earlier scene clearly. The 10 kings of He Longshan had joined forces and became a war formation, demonic dragon knight. But Jian Wushuang swept them off and the 10 kings died. With his thought, thousands of universe gods had suddenly died. The head of He Longshan, who was the strongest among them, couldn't make one single move on Jian Wushuang and was instantly killed. Everything shocked them, and they were dumbfounded. Run! No one knew who the first person who shouted was. The very next moment, the surrounding countless universe gods, including the few heads of He Longshan, didn't hesitate, but opted to run for their lives. Run! 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 The bandits forgot about everything, but only knew to run. In an instant, the large number of bandits who were originally surrounding the spaceship ran away. The danger vanished into thin air in a sudden. On the deck, universe gods and Hong Ri mercenary group looked surprised, and it stirred a commotion in everyone's heart. Especially Yu Gang. He looked as though he had seen a ghost. One must know that the people in Hong Ri mercenary group were unhappy with Jian Wushuang's existence earlier. They thought it'd be more than enough for Su Hong to hire Hong Ri mercenary group alone. He didn't need to hire another person. On top of that, Jian Wushuang wasn't famous, and they didn't think just how strong Jian Wushuang was. But then, after Jian Wushuang had showed his power, everyone was taken by surprise. Too strong. He definitely has the fighting power of one on Universe God ranking list. Definitely. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to defeat He Longshan's troop all alone. This Jian Ke, is he an expert on Universe God ranking list? The people in Hong Ri mercenary group were hot with emotion. They finally understood why Su Hong would hire Jian Wushuang. Just then swoosh, Jian Wushuang landed on the deck once again, among the people in Hong Ri mercenary group. The people in Hong Ri mercenary group looked at Jian Wushuang again at a close distance, and all of them were gulping their saliva, including Yu Gang. There was an unprecedented reverence in their eyes. Jian Wushuang stole a glance at everyone, but didn't say much. He walked into the cabin before everyone's gazes. When Jian Wushuang entered the cabin, the people in Hong Ri mercenary group let out a breath of relief. Go. Let's continue with our journey, Yu Gang said, and continued to drive the spaceship again. In the spaceship cabin, you live up to your reputation as disciple of Star Palace. I'm impressed. Su Hong looked at Jian Wushuang in shock and smiled. To have you, Jian Wushuang, escort me personally is my pleasure. Don't be too happy just yet. After all, our real trouble has yet to arrive. Jian Wushuang looked solemn. Su Hong squinted his eyes. The expert that Chu sect sent might be very strong, but with your power, you should be able to deal with them, right? In Su Hong's view, Jian Wushuang could deal with a huge bandit group like He Longshan. The expert that Chu sect sent wouldn't be any stronger than He Longshan. So Jian Wushuang should be able to deal with it easily. If it was before He Longshan, I definitely could. But now it's hard to say, Jian Wushuang said. Why? Su Hong was confused. I told you before that Chu sect definitely sent experts to hide among Hong Ri mercenary group. I didn't take any action before, so Chu sect didn't know my background. They'd only treat me as an ordinary peak universe god in the third heaven. But now that I have exposed my power, Chu sect will definitely know, and they will definitely lay down a plan according to my power. The experts that they send will definitely be extremely strong, Jian Wushuang said. Su Hong was stunned and immediately understood. The experts from Chu sect either did not take action at all, or took action with full confidence. They naturally took Jian Wushuang's power into consideration. What can we do? Su Hong creased his eyebrows and asked. I don't know, but when I attacked earlier, I did something on purpose. I didn't show my full power. Plus, the expert that Chu Sek sent to hide among Hong Ri mercenary group, is most likely a universe god in the third heaven, or even lower. Hence, his understanding is limited, and he won't be able to tell my true ability. I reckon he will only treat me as an expert suspected to have fighting power, like one on the universe god ranking list. Hence, we are still at an advantage, Jian Wushuang said. Hearing what Jian Wushuang said, Su Hong was extremely shocked. What you revealed earlier wasn't your full power. Jian Wushuang glanced at Su Hong but didn't answer. In actual fact, he did hold back during the battle earlier. He didn't give full play to the power of reincarnation, and his swordsmanship wasn't performed to the limit. He had just passed through his second inverse cultivation test, and his swordsmanship was in an advancement period. During the years he was preparing in Lineage of Star, he had improved in swordsmanship tremendously with the aid of the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation. The most distinguished achievement would be that he had created the reincarnation sword principle. The reincarnation sword principle, he had named it so because he had comprehended from the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation. There's 7 strokes in the reincarnation sword principle. Every stroke was a fierce unique skill. He had only performed 2 of the fiercer strokes, the bleeding technique and bleed to the end of the world technique. Among the reincarnation sword principle, he had also created another stronger stroke compared to the 2, but he had yet to perform it. Just wait, the expert that Chu Sect sent will be here in no time. Jian Wushuang muttered, then he closed his eyes. Just as Jian Wushuang had expected, the expert sent by Chu Sect immediately found out about Jian Wushuang's power after their encounter with He Longshan, and they made a corresponding plan. In the boundless void, there were a dozen figures waiting patiently on a mini island that was abandoned. Very soon, a crimson spaceship stopped before the island in the void. Then, there was a crimson-robed figure that walked out slowly from the crimson spaceship. He's here. Looking at the crimson-robed figure, people who were waiting on the island looked excited. Chapter 1442, Fighting Power Like One on Universe God Ranking List. Chapter 1442, Fighting Power Like One on Universe God Ranking List. Mr. Zhao Han. Looking at the person in the crimson robe walk out from the scarlet spaceship, the dozen experts that were waiting on the island bowed politely, except for one. The cold-looking young man in the crimson robe overlooked everyone on the island. Then, he shook and suddenly appeared before the peak universe god in the third heaven that never bowed. Pang Bo, long time no see. You're here too. The young man Zhao Han said with a smile. The person who was called Pang Bo was a brawny, middle-aged man who was more than 2 meters tall. The brawny, middle-aged man carried a green saber on his back, and his figure looked bold and strong, with a tinge of imposing manner. Hearing what Zhao Han said, Pang Bo replied coldly, "There's some trouble. Otherwise, there would be no need for you to be here." "What kind of trouble? Even you, an expert who is extremely close to the standard of universe god ranking list, can't deal with it?" Zhao Han smiled. "The enemy is suspected to have fighting power, like one on universe god ranking list," Pang Bo replied. "Oh." Zhao Han squinted his eyes. Being extremely close to the standard of universe god ranking list, and suspected to have fighting power, like one on universe god ranking list, obviously something unusual was happening. "Tell me what's going on?" Zhao Han asked. "As you are invited by the Chu sect, you naturally know the aim of the mission, and the person that we are going to kill. Although he isn't strong, he hired some experts to escort him. Among the experts, Hong Ri Mercenary Group is just a mercenary group after all. You can ignore them." However, when they were in Floating City, he called for extra help. "The help's name is Jian Ku," Pang Bo said. "Jian Ku? Who can't tell that that's an alias?" Zhao Han smirked. "It's this Jian Ku who is suspected to have fighting power like one on universe god ranking list." "Yes," Pang Bo nodded. "Not long ago, Jian Ku and the rest of them encountered the bandits from He Longshan in the boundless void." "He Longshan?" Zhao Han looked surprised. "I happen to have been training in the boundless void for a while now, and I've heard about He Longshan. It is said that He Longshan has hundreds of thousands of bandits. Among them were quite a few universe gods in the third heaven. There are even a few peak universe gods in the third heaven. They also have the 10 kings, which is quite well known. That's right. Whichever troops want to go through the boundless void, as long as they meet with He Longshan, will definitely experience a nightmare. There is almost no one who could escape under the watch of He Longshan. Jianku and the troop met He Longshan in the boundless void, supposedly, and things seemed bad. In the end, Pang Bo creased his eyebrows. Why? Unless they escaped through He Longshan's hands? Zhao Yu joked casually. They didn't escape, but they defeated He Longshan wantonly with thunderous measures, Pang Bo said. What? Zhao Han's face suddenly grew grave. He had been training in the boundless void for quite some time. Initially, he intended to make trouble for He Longshan, as he had heard of He Longshan's power. He knew clearly how great one's power must be to be able to defeat He Longshan wantonly. Would it be that the one they encountered wasn't the main force of He Longshan, but just a partial section of the experts? Zhao Han couldn't help but ask. No, they met the main force led by He Longshan's leader. On top of that, He Longshan launched their full force. There was a total of tens of thousands of universe gods, and inclusive of the 10 kings were involved in the action. But in the end, they were killed and defeated. The leader of He Longshan, and the 10 kings all died. The person who causes that to happen is Jianku, Pang Bo said solemnly. You meant that Jianku alone killed the 10 kings from He Longshan, and their leaders in front of the universe gods from He Longshan? Zhao Han asked. Yes, the 10 kings from He Longshan already gave their all, and they even made a formation. But in the end, Jianku defeated them directly, Pang Bo said. Then, even Zhao Han had a glimpse of shock in his eyes. The 10 kings from He Longshan, the moment they united and formed their formation, it is said that only one who possesses power like one on universe god ranking list could be evenly matched. But Jianku could defeat the formation directly. His power shouldn't be weak. However, it doesn't mean that he possesses fighting power like one on universe god ranking list, Zhao Han smiled. Doesn't it? Pang Bo was stunned. Fighting power of one on universe god ranking list isn't something easily achievable. Otherwise, there wouldn't be only 100 of them, Zhao Han smiled. In the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, how many are like you, extremely close to the standard of one on universe god ranking list? And how many are suspected to have fighting power like one on universe god ranking list? There is a countless number of them. But among these people, how many could really be evenly matched with experts on universe god ranking list? For example, 50,000 years ago, a genius disciple from East Royal Sanctuary, Yi Han, was naturally gifted, and he defeated many experts who were close to the standard of one on universe god ranking list. He was recognized as being suspected of having fighting power, like one on the universe god ranking list. But in the end, when he really came across an expert on universe god ranking list, and the expert was only on the 93rd place, considered the bottom of the list, what happened then? With just 3 moves, Yi Han was defeated, heavily defeated, without a chance to struggle. Hence, whoever has yet to fight against an expert on universe god ranking list will not be qualified to be recognized as suspected to have fighting power, like one on universe god ranking list. Just like the 10 kings from He Longshan, they said that no one without the fighting power of one on the universe god ranking list could fight evenly with them once they were in their formation. But in actual fact, have they fought with an expert on universe god ranking list before? Do they know how strong an expert on the universe god ranking list is? Zhao Han looked like he didn't care. Well, that's true. In the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, there were many that were said to be suspected to have fighting power, like one on universe god ranking list, but they were actually far from the real experts on the universe god ranking list. Jianku and the troop are still in the boundless void. Zhao Han asked again. Yes, our people are among their troop. We know of their location, Pang Bo replied. If so, let's get into action. Let's meet with this person that you said to be suspected to have fighting power, like one on universe god ranking list. Jianku, Zhao Han scoffed. With you involving yourself personally, there shouldn't be any unexpected events. Pang Bo smiled faintly. The universe gods at the side were absolutely confident in Mr. Zhao Han. Forget about the fact that Jianke might possess fighting power, like one on universe god ranking list. Even if he did, they believed that Mr. Zhao Han could easily seize control of him. After all, Mr. Zhao Han became an expert of the universe god ranking list in the 10 cultivation sanctuaries long ago, and he wasn't too low on the list. Without much preparation, Zhao Han and Pang Bo led a dozen universe gods onto the delicate scarlet spaceship. Then they plunged towards where Jian Wushuang and the troop were. Chapter 1443, They're Here. Chapter 1443, They're Here. In the boundless void, the spaceship was still traveling forward. On the deck, the people in Hongri mercenary group were very free. It has been rather peaceful. There are not even any bandits that come and look for trouble. Humph! Which ordinary bandit groups dare to ask for trouble with us? Hongri mercenary group? Even if we were to encounter the extremely strong bandit groups like He Longshan, we have Mr. Jianke with us. There's nothing to be afraid of. When would we be as powerful as Mr. Jianke? They chatted leisurely as they gathered in groups. In one of the corners, there were 2 universe gods together. The 2 universe gods were just ordinary universe gods in the 3rd heaven, and they were recruited by Hongri mercenary group when they were at Floating City. Mr. Pang Bo already sent a message. They'll be here in another half a day. By then, we carry out the plan accordingly, an elderly with triangle eyes said in a very low voice. Besides the person before him, no one else could hear. On this spaceship, there's Jianke who swept He Longshan alone. Mr. Pang Bo, would they succeed? The other blonde-haired maiden ceased her eyebrows and asked. Don't worry. Not only is Mr. Pang Bo coming, there's also Mr. Zhao Han. The elderly with triangle eyes replied. Mr. Zhao Han? The expert on universe god ranking list? The blonde-haired girl was shocked and immediately beamed with joy. Then it should be fine. No matter how great Jianke is, he definitely is far behind when he is compared with an expert on the universe god ranking list. Let's get ready. There's about half a day left, the elderly with triangle eyes said. Half a day flew past really quickly. In the spaceship cabin, Jian Wushuang, who had been closing his eyes, suddenly opened his eyes. His sole power sensed the other spaceship in the void in front of them approaching them. Su Hong, the person who wants to kill you is here, Jian Wushuang spoke. He's here. Su Hong's face grew solemn instantly. Immediately, Jian Wushuang and Su Hong came out from the cabin. Mr. Jianke, Su Hong, why are both of you out? Group leader of Hongri mercenary group smiled, and he looked over. Jian Wushuang didn't reply, but fixed his gaze in the void before him. You gang, tell your people to be prepared. There's a strong enemy approaching, Su Hong said in a deep voice. A strong enemy again? Yu Gang creased his eyebrows. The strong enemy this time is much scarier than He Longshan, Su Hong said. What? Yu Gang got a shock and gave out a command in a roar. Hurry up. Get up and be prepared to fight your enemy. The people in Hongri mercenary group who were on the deck were frightened. They stood up and divine weapons appeared in their hands. Everyone was looking into the dark void before them. There was a crimson light appearing gradually, and it continued to magnify. It's a spaceship. Such a beautiful spaceship. The people in Hongri mercenary group fixed their gazes on the beautiful crimson spaceship. Just then, on the corner of the deck, the elderly with triangle eyes and the blonde-haired maiden, who were well prepared, exchanged a glance. Action! The elderly with triangle eyes roared. Suddenly, there was an eruption of 2 bolts of aura on the spaceship. The elderly with triangle eyes and the blonde-haired maiden took action simultaneously. They launched their strongest attacks at the structure of the side of the spaceship. The structure of the spaceship was heavy-duty. When a strong attack was launched from the outside, it would require time and effort to break. However, if the attack was launched from the inside, it would be much easier. The elderly with triangular eyes and the blonde-haired maiden stayed on the spaceship for a while, and they knew clearly about the weakness of the structure. Then, they attacked the 2 weakest points directly and did so at the same time. Instantly, the structure on the side of the spaceship shattered. Shit! Yu Gang's face grew grave. You two bastards. There's two of them? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He knew long ago that there was an expert sent by Chu's sect among Hong Ri mercenary group, but he had never expected there to be two. The two of them suddenly launched an attack at the structure, and he couldn't stop them in time. Hurry up and run! The elderly with triangle eyes and the blonde-haired maiden removed the structure and left the spaceship without hesitation. They wanted to run to the Crimson spaceship and meet up with Zhao Han, Pang Bo, and the rest of the troop. But just as they dashed out from the spaceship, there were two shapeless soul attacks that hit them. What? The elderly with triangle eyes and the blonde-haired maiden looked terrified. Then their figures fell down the very next moment. Although I can't stop you breaking the structure in time, it's fairly easy to kill you. Jian Wushuang looked cold. Awesome, Yu Gang, and the universe gods and Hong Ri mercenary group at the surrounding felt great. Be prepared, the massacre is going to start, Jian Wushuang said. The universe gods and Hong Ri mercenary group suddenly lifted their heads. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. They saw figures with fierce auras turning into flowing light and plunging towards their spaceship. Without the hindrance of the structure, the flowing light descended onto the deck directly. There was a total of 30 figures descending simultaneously. Luckily, the spaceship was extremely huge. The deck was like a mini battlefield, and it could fit these people. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and stared at the people before him. Yu Gang by his side, and the universe gods and Hong Ri mercenary group looked on in distress. They had already noticed the people who came were all peak universe gods in the third heaven. There was a total of 30 of them. Among them, the one leading was the brawny man carrying a green saber. His aura was much stronger compared to the others. You are. Yu Gang stared at the brawny man carrying a green saber, and there was terror in his eyes. Pang Bo, it's you. You know him? Jian Wushuang glanced at Yu Gang. Yes, Yu Gang nodded. Pang Bo was originally a group leader of a huge mercenary group. But in the end, because he offended an expert on universe god ranking lists by accident, and the mercenary group under his lead was massacred. The expert on the universe god ranking list originally wanted to kill him too, but Pang Bo was too strong. His defense power is terrifyingly strong. Although the expert on the universe god ranking list could suppress him, he couldn't kill him, and he gained fame in that battle. He is an expert who is extremely close to the standard of the universe god ranking list. Is that so? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. You are Yu Jianke? Pang Bo's gaze was cold as he looked at Jian Wushuang. It's me. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. If you were to leave here now, you might save your own life, Pang Bo said coldly. Hee, you might not be qualified to say this. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Is it? There was a flash of coldness in Pang Bo's eyes, and he plunged forward like a fierce tiger in the very next moment. Chapter 1444. Universe God Ranking List Zhao Han. Chapter 1444. Universe God Ranking List Zhao Han. Pack. Pang Bo charged forward, and the deck broke as a terrifying aura swept in all directions. Ninth Thunder Sword. Pang Bo was raging with a fierce aura, as the green saber in his hand was engulfed in green bolts of thunder. He suddenly appeared before Jian Wushuang, and slashed with the green saber. Whoosh! 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 There was a total of 9 sword lights, and everyone had a boundless power of thunder. Most importantly, not only were the 9 sword lights getting stronger with every stroke, their speed grew with every stroke. Jian Wushuang concentrated and Blood Mountain sword appeared in his hand. He erupted his divine power and greeted his opponent. The clashing of blades was heard. The 9 continuous clashes caused great impact, and Jian Wushuang couldn't help but retreat. On the other hand, Pang Bo looked even more triggered. There was an armor made of green thunder protecting his body out of nowhere. He wore a thunder armor, and held a green thunder saber. Pang Bo then looked like he had transformed into a thunder god. 12 Thunder Sword. Pang Bo again wielded his saber fiercely, but by then it was a total of 12 sword lights. This sword technique is quite impressive. Although it isn't on the level of real god, From the continuous overlapping of accumulated power, the last one could barely be comparable with real God-unique skill. No wonder he was said to be close to the standard of one on Universe God ranking list. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. He could tell that Pang Bo's power couldn't be much weaker than the top genius of Dark Phoenix Pavilion, who was a universe god in the third heaven, Lin Shui. The 12 sword lights descended one after another. Jian Wushuang immediately raised his sword to block. He blocked 11 sword lights in an instant. When the last sword light had descended, Jian Wushuang's gaze turned cold. Reincarnation Sword Principle, the bleeding technique. Rumble. A terrifying crimson light suddenly exploded, and the entire void drowned in a crimson ocean. In the crimson ocean, a scarlet sword light soared along with boundless power, including the slight bit of power of reincarnation that Jian Wushuang comprehended. The scarlet sword light collided with the last sword light that Pang Bo had performed directly. Bang! There was a loud, vigorous noise before the entire spaceship broke entirely. The terrifying divine power shattered it while the people on the spaceship fall and dispersed into all directions from the impact. In the midst of the divine storm, a figure suddenly retreated and finally regained his stability. The person was Pang Bo. So strong. Such strength. Pang Bo was still engulfed in the green thunder, but his palms started shivering. Both arms were going numb. Jian Wushuang gradually revealed his figure among the divine storm. His face turned cold as he stared at Pang Bo. No wonder experts on Universe God ranking lists couldn't kill you. Your defense power is not bad. However, with you alone, you're not qualified to be my opponent yet. Let the person behind come forth. The person behind. Su Hong and the people from Hong Ri mercenary group were stunned. Haha, very well. You could identify my existence. A malicious laughter suddenly burst out. Then, there was a figure in crimson robe that floated out from the delicate crimson spaceship and appeared before everyone. He looked cold, but he was wearing a creepy smile as he measured Jian Wushuang up and down. Although he looked calm, every universe god from Hong Ri mercenary group stiffened at the sight of him. Jian Wushuang's face also grew grave when he saw the approaching person. Expert. He is at least 10 times stronger than Pang Bo, Lin Shui from Dark Phoenix Pavilion, or even Ho Yi, who defeated Lim Shui and declared that he was going to challenge an expert on Universe God ranking list. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists. He lit up his soul power, and he could clearly sense the boundless pressure that the other person was giving him. Zhao Han, number 76 on Universe God ranking list. The man in the crimson robe, Zhao Han, smiled faintly. Hearing what he had said, everyone from Hong Ri mercenary group were shocked. An expert on the Universe God ranking list. Shocking. To people from Hong Ri mercenary group, Pang Bo, who was close to the standard of one on Universe God ranking list, was already an existence that was beyond reach. Let alone Zhao Han, who was truly an expert on Universe God ranking list. As expected, Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised. To be able to place such great pressure on him, only experts on Universe God ranking lists could do so. On the Universe God ranking list, there was a total of 100 top experts. Although Zhao Han was only on the 76th, even the strongest Universe God in the third heaven in lineage of star was only on the 51st on Universe God ranking list, which was not much stronger than Zhao Han. I do not kill any nobody. Tell me your real name. Don't try to fool me with a pseudonym like Jian Ku. Zhao Han spoke in a cool tone. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and replied, Star Palace, Jian Wushuang. I see. A genius disciple of Star Palace from lineage of star. No wonder you have such power, Zhao Han said. Lineage of star. Overlord of Purple Moon Sanctuary in Star Land. Such great power. Normally no one has the guts to provoke them, while disciples of Star Palace are lineage of stars precious. Whoever kills disciples of Star Palace will definitely trigger lineage of star. However, I, Zhao Han, happen to be the kind of person who isn't afraid of anything. If you intend to kill me, you can't do it with words, Jian Wushuang said coldly. Of course. Zhao Han's smile turned cold, and there was suddenly a terrifying aura soaring from his body. Simultaneously, boundless divine power flowed out and formed an illusionary image of a huge golden bear in an instant. Jian Wushuang, let me see just how capable are you as a disciple of Star Palace. Zhao Han fixed his gaze on Jian Wushuang, and his figure shook the next moment. The void before Jian Wushuang shattered while Zhao Han appeared from the shattered void. He swung his palm that was covered in faint gold light. Then, the huge golden bear too swung its paw ferociously. Hong! The golden paw continuously grew, and suddenly covered a range of more than 100 miles. The void within the range shattered and collapsed. The terrifying force locked Jian Wushuang within. Such power! Jian Wushuang's face grew solemn. Jian Wushuang, be careful. Zhao Han is just like you. He has already comprehended a slight bit of power of Heavenway, and he has grasped the myriad beasts doctrine in the 9 Heaven God doctrine. This scariest part about the doctrine is its attack power. Not only is it strong, it is also extremely ferocious. King of Venomous Worms said in Jian Wushuang's head. Myriad beasts doctrine? Jian Wushuang smirked. We shall see if his myriad beasts doctrine is stronger, or if my reincarnation doctrine is more powerful. Chapter 1445, Jian Wushuang vs. Zhao Han. Chapter 1445, Jian Wushuang vs. Zhao Han. With a slight bit of scorching heat, Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship erupted. Jian Wushuang slashed with his sword. Not only did he give full rein to his divine power and ancient god power to his extreme limit, but he had also performed with the slight bit of power of reincarnation that he had comprehended. Break! The cold sword light brought along a shrill piercing whistle, and instantly hit the golden palm that was pressing down. Walala! An enormous amount of divine power dispersed, and the huge golden palm was torn apart by the sword light. Not bad. Zhao Han saw the scene and sneered. He then flipped his wrist to reveal that he was wearing a pair of golden gloves. The golden gloves gave out an outstanding power. They were obviously a very fierce chaos unique treasure. Then let's give it a try. Zhao Han's face grew ferocious as boundless divine power flowed into his hands in an instant. The golden bear statue that soared up from his body immediately bellowed at the sky above. The golden bear was acting as though it was insane. The 2 huge bear paws slapped out at lightning speed like a huge golden mountain. Every golden mountain covered an expanse of thousands of miles, and traveling towards Jian Wushuang. Looking at the golden mountains that were pressing in on him, Jian Wushuang couldn't dodge. So strong. Compared to the earlier slam, it is much stronger. Jian Wushuang's face grew solemn. If so. Virum. The billowing scarlet flame suddenly soared up and formed a crimson sea, surrounding Jian Wushuang. And Jian Wushuang was the king of the Crimson Sea. Once the secret skill of Scarlet Kingdom was put to play, Jian Wushuang's overall performance doubled. Kill! Jian Wushuang roared and wielded his sword. A fierce power tore the golden mountains that were pressing towards him. Simultaneously, Jian Wushuang's figure was moving closer to Zhao Han at a terrifyingly fast speed. After a short while, Jian Wushuang appeared before Zhao Han. Reincarnation Sword Principle, bleed to the end of the world. Jian Wushuang wielded his sword directly. Wow! Shrill crimson sword light filled the air. In the dark void, it was like riding a bloody and sad yet stirring road to the end of the world. The road to the end of the world was unusually brilliant. The sword light was aiming at Zhao Han's throat. Funny. Zhao Han's gaze fixed, and the right hand in a golden glove suddenly became a dragon claw, and clawed out at lightning speed. Behind his back, there was instantly a powerful golden dragon, and the golden dragon was clawing out with his claw. Clash! The dragon claw that Zhao Han struck out with grabbed Jian Wushuang's sword directly. The clashing sound of enormous divine power didn't move him at all. Grabbing my sword with a bare hand. You have guts. Jian Wushuang smirked and Blood Mountain sword in his hands immediately let out a shocking sword intention. The entire sword was giving out a shrill sword whistle. What? Zhao Han's face changed. He could clearly sense the terrifying sword intention from the sword and the shrill aura. He had an illusion that if he didn't move his palm, he would definitely be chopped into 2 by the shrill aura. Swoosh! Without hesitation, Zhao Han immediately let go of Blood Mountain Sword and his figures. Demonic Dragon. Jian Wushuang's eyes grew cold. Then his soul power turned into 5 demonic dragons in an instant. The 5 demonic dragons carried terrifying murderous intentions and charged forward like lightning. 5 worms, how dare you act wildly before the real huge dragon? Zhao Han shouted, and the golden dragon behind him opened its mouth. A terrifying roar was heard. The sound wave of the angry bellow shattered the 5 demonic dragons directly. But the demonic dragon just shattered, and a black light shot toward Zhao Han in silence. That's it. Zhao Han contracted his pupils. He already could see that the black light was a black long spear. The black long spear carried a unique power, and it came before his eyes in an instant. Humph! Zhao Han huffed and clasped his hands together. The huge golden bear was originally behind him, but it suddenly appeared before him. The golden bear solidified its body, and he blocked the spear, relying on its huge body. Although the long spear was blocked, it contained a soul attack, and it hit Zhao Han without hindrance. Consciousness attack? Zhao Han creased his eyebrows and instantly recovered. He blocked my attack of inextinguishable light that I used with his god-killing spear so easily? Jian Wushuang was shocked. In the void, Zhao Han stood and regained stability. There was shock in his eyes as he looked at Jian Wushuang. On the battlefield, there was a temporary silence. At the surrounding, Hongri mercenary group, including those peak universe gods in the third heaven, who were there to kill Su Hong, were gawking at the scene. When Jian Wushuang and Zhao Han stopped, they came back to reality. So strong! Too strong! This is the fighting power of one on universe god ranking list. We are all universe gods in the third heaven, but we are of a totally different level compared to the 2 of them. I feel that Mr. Zhao Han could easily kill me with a casual slap. Same goes for Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship. Everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked by the terrifying battle. In the middle of the battlefield, Zhao Han finally spoke again. It seems that I've belittled you. You really do have the fighting power of one on the universe god ranking list. Zhao Han smiled faintly. As you are quite powerful and you're a disciple of Star Palace. As long as you can take my next move, I'll let you live. You're boasting shamelessly, Jian Wushuang shouted. Then take this. There was a loud shrill, and there were 2 rays of brilliant golden light from Zhao Han's hands. The golden light was constantly magnifying like 2 golden suns. Then there was an ancient, strong beast that appeared behind him out of nowhere. The beast had 3 heads and no one could recognize it. However, the moment the beast opened its eyes, it sent chills down everyone's spine. Then Zhao Han's sun-like palm swung. Rumble! The surrounding void started trembling with madness. The terrifying power made every surrounding person roar uncontrollably. Everyone couldn't help but stare at the 2 golden suns. Real god unique skill. Jian Wushuang's face grew grave. He knew Zhao Han, an expert on universe god ranking list, who had already comprehended a slight bit of myriad beasts doctrine. He had already created real god unique skill. Then, he tightened his grip and Blood Mountain Sword quivered in madness, and let out its extreme power. Reincarnation Sword Principle Enduring Samsara. Chapter 1446 Myriad Beasts Idol. Chapter 1446 Myriad Beasts Idol. Rumble. A black and a white ray of unusual sword light merged together perfectly, and there was a huge black and white whirlpool that appeared out of nowhere. The formation of the Enduring Samsara. It was the strongest technique that Jian Wushuang had created through the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation over a dozen years. Although the technique wasn't a real god unique skill, it had reached the extreme limit of a rank 3 unique skill. The huge black and white whirlpool and the 2 golden suns collided. There wasn't any ferocious rumble like how they had imagined, nor was there any explosion of terrifying power. There were only noises from the 2 bolts of forces madly colliding with one another. The 2 bolts of strength were continuously wearing down, but finally, the golden sun had won by a notch. However, after the golden sun defeated the black and white whirlpool, it didn't have much strength left. Hence, it couldn't have any effect on Jian Wushuang's divine body. He withstood my technique directly? Zhao Han squinted his eyes. Jian Wushuang, I can tell that you've already comprehended a slight bit of power of Heaven Wei. It's only a matter of time until you enter the universe God ranking list. You probably wouldn't need much time to catch up with me on the ranking. A genius like you is someone I'd really love to eliminate ahead of time. However, I will honor my words. As you withstood my attack earlier, I shall show mercy. Please leave. Zhao Han stood there as he stared at Jian Wushuang, as though he was watching his junior. You sound as though you are being lenient and letting me live, but I didn't see your ability to kill me, Jian Wushuang sneered. Zhao Han, if you were to really have the ability to kill me, show me. Otherwise, you, an expert on the universe God ranking list, shall die here today. Jian Wushuang, are you trying to die? Zhao Han's face turned cold. He really didn't want to kill Jian Wushuang. Firstly, Jian Wushuang wasn't that weak. Unless he performed that technique, otherwise, he wouldn't be able to kill him. However, it wouldn't be easy for him to perform the technique. Unless it was necessary, he wouldn't perform it. Secondly, Jian Wushuang was a disciple of Star Palace. He had scruples towards lineage of Star after all. If Jian Wushuang were to provoke him, he had no alternative. I'm trying to die? The person who is trying to die might be you. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold, and the aura in his body continued to strengthen. Humph, if so, you can't blame me then. Zhao Han's eyes were covered with murderous intention, as an enormous amount of divine power crazily soared. Rumble! There were suddenly 3 huge figures behind Zhao Han. The 3 huge figures were 3 golden idols that were tens of thousands of meters tall. The 3 golden idols looked as though they had the power to break the heaven and the earth. Zhao Han, who created the 3 golden idols, his face became ferocious, and his eyes were red. This is myriad beasts' idols? King of venomous worms, who resided in Jian Wushuang's body, suddenly exclaimed. Myriad beasts' idols? What's that? Jian Wushuang asked closely. He could feel the terrifying power of the 3 golden idols. Myriad beasts' idols is a kind of powerful secret skill that was specially created for experts who can comprehend myriad beasts' doctrine. The secret skill gathers the power of idol, and every idol will be extremely strong. When the 3 idols gather together, it is enough for Zhao Han to enhance his strength to another level, King of Venomous Worms said. However, I can tell that Zhao Han has barely comprehended myriad beasts' doctrine. Hence, he can barely perform the secret skill. I reckon it should countercharge him too. It is the power of idol after all. It isn't so easily controlled. Zhao Han has such a trump card. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows and his face grew extremely solemn. Jian Wushuang die. Zhao Han let out a furious roar. Then he took a heavy step and clapped. The 3 tall golden idols suddenly let out brilliant golden light. The 3 powers of idol flowed into Zhao Han's hands, and his palm became extremely terrifying. Rumble! The towering golden palm slammed down on Jian Wushuang directly. Before the palm descended, the mere handprint brought about a terrifying pressuring force, and the blood in Jian Wushuang started boiling and churning, as though the bones all over his body were going to explode. Then the golden palm finally arrived. Just then, roar! There was a sudden angry roar that could break the universe. Underneath the golden palm, there was an extremely rich golden light that soared. There was a divine ape soared up while it engulfed in golden light. The divine ape appeared, and immediately let out a terrifying roar. Then it straightaway knocked the golden palm away. In the void, Jian Wushuang stood coldly as he held Blood Mountain sword in his hands, while the golden divine ape, that soared up from his body, also held a huge sword in his hand with towering aura. His personal eruption of divine power, in combination with the extreme explosion of soul power, had formed a divine ape. It was a perfect match of personal divine power and soul power. Jian Wushuang's fighting power was billowing. How could he? Zhao Han, who was under the illusionary image of the 3 idols, saw the divine ape that Jian Wushuang had created, and his face grew grave. He never thought that after he played his trump card Jian Wushuang could still withstand his attack. Zhao Han, you and I, let's battle again. Jian Wushuang, who was engulfed in the golden divine ape, had fighting intention. He fixed his gaze on Zhao Han, then took a huge stride forward. The huge golden divine ape suddenly charged forward. Shit! There was fear from the bottom of Zhao Han's heart. It is too difficult for me to perform myriad beast idols. Forget about how long I can even stand. Handling the countercharge itself from performing myriad beasts idols is suffocating enough, but Jian Wushuang. It is obviously not difficult for him to perform his masterstroke. If we continue to fight, I will be at a disadvantage. Zhao Han thought, and immediately made a decision. Dumbass, what are you doing there? Hurry up and take action. Kill Su Hong. Pang Bo, hurry up. Zhao Han let out a roar, and he looked as though he was going to bother Jian Wushuang again. Pang Bo, and the dozens of universe gods in the third heaven, who were around the battlefield, immediately came back to reality. Actually, they took action long ago. However, Jian Wushuang and Zhao Han's fighting impact was too huge. They hid far away, as they were afraid that they might be impacted. Hence, their fight naturally ceased. Then, when they heard Zhao Han's bellow, Pang Bo and his troop quickly took action again. They just moved, and Jian Wushuang, who was at the core of the battlefield, his face changed, and immediately the huge divine ape suddenly shook and appeared before Su Hong. His cold gaze swept towards Pang Bo and the universe gods in the third heaven. Chapter 1447. The second part of the task completed. Chapter 1447. The second part of the task completed. This, looking at Jian Wushuang, who stood right at the front, Pang Bo and his troop were frightened. His figure paused in the void too. Jian Wushuang, I, Zhao Han, will remember what happened today. In the future, I must take revenge. Zhao Han's cold voice rang. Mr. Zhao Han left. Hurry up and let's go. With Jian Wushuang around, it's impossible for us to kill Su Hong. Let's go. Pang Bo and the other universe gods in the third heaven weren't stupid either. They naturally left immediately. Looking at everyone leaving, Jian Wushuang didn't chase, and the people in Hong Ri mercenary group let out a breath of relief. The huge golden divine ape on the surface of Jian Wushuang slowly dispersed. He watched the direction the crimson spaceship went in, and his face grew solemn. Expert on universe god ranking list, he lives up to his reputation, Jian Wushuang muttered. He had given his all during his earlier battle. He put all his techniques to play, but he could only be evenly matched with Zhao Han. Zhao Han comprehends myriad beasts doctrine. He should be one notch higher than I in terms of realization. Plus, he created a real god-unique skill, and even possesses strong secret skills like myriad beasts idols. Compared to him, my comprehension of reincarnation doctrine and my unique skills are slightly weaker. The reason why I could be evenly matched with him was because of the combination of soul power and personal divine power, and also my possession of various treasures and secret skills. With such power, he will only be 76th on the universe god ranking list. I really wonder just how powerful are those people before him, especially those above 20, and those in the top 10. Just how scary of a monster are they? Jian Wushuang clenched his fist. He had just broken through and become universe god in the second heaven after all. There was still extremely huge space for improvement. Only when he had reached his peak might he be qualified to be evenly matched with the top 20 on the universe god ranking list, and those monsters in the top 10. Jian Wushuang. Su Hong's voice was heard from behind. I never thought Chu sect was capable of hiring an expert on universe god ranking list. Luckily we have you. Otherwise we would be doomed. Su Hong was glad. At the same time, he marveled at his power. One should know that Zhao Han was a true expert on universe god ranking list, and he was at the 76th place on the list. With such power, Jian Wushuang had forced him to retreat. Just how strong was Jian Wushuang? Not any weaker than Zhao Han, right? Experts on universe god ranking list are extremely rare. Chu sect was able to hire Zhao Han, and he was already really hard to come by. It is impossible for them to hire another expert on universe god ranking list who is stronger than Zhao Han to kill you at such short notice. Plus, the two persons among Hong Ri mercenary group were exposed. Without the two of them providing information, The experts from Chu sect won't be able to trace us in the boundless void. Hence, on our journey, we won't come across any danger, Jian Wushuang explained. Su Hong beamed with joy. Let's continue our journey. Jian Wushuang didn't say much, but urged everyone to depart once again. The group leader of Hong Ri mercenary group, Yu Gang, quickly took out a brand new spaceship, and everyone continued their journey on the new spaceship. On the way, the people of Hong Ri mercenary group treated Jian Wushuang even more reverently. After all, forgetting about the fact that Jian Wushuang was a disciple of Star Palace, his capability to force Zhao Han's retreat alone had instilled fear in them. On the other hand, in Lineage of Star, in the cave dwelling that was made of special gemstones, Hall Master Yuan received an update. Chu sect sent Zhao Han, who was at the 76th place on Universe God ranking list, to stop and kill him. But in the end he couldn't complete his mission. Zhao Han fought a battle against Jian Wushuang, and they were evenly matched? How is this possible? After receiving the news, even Hall Master Yuan was shocked. But very soon he calmed down. It seems that I've belittled the young man's potential. To be able to fight against Zhao Han like that, his power definitely reached a standard to be listed on the Universe God ranking list. Plus, he had just passed through his second inverse cultivation test, and it had only been 100 years. If he were to continue to improve, he could reach the top 20 on the Universe God ranking list, or even the top 10. Until he passes through his inverse cultivation test in the third heaven, it should be easy for him to be listed in the top 10 on the Universe God ranking list. Such a gifted genius, there's never been one in the history of Lineage of Star. On top of that, he's an inverse cultivator. Hall Master Yuan was beaming with joy. This young man, the arrangement that I specially made for him wasn't in vain. I hope he can continue to surprise me. In the boundless void, the following journey went as predicted by Jian Wushuang. They didn't come across any other experts that Chu sect sent, and only encountered some bandits. But none of those bandits came to find trouble with them. In a dozen years, the troop traveled across the boundless void and stepped foot in Purple Moon Sanctuary. The second part of the task is finally completed. Jian Wushuang had a smile on his face. The second part of the task was definitely much more dangerous than the first part of the task. Not only did they come across He Longshan, most importantly, they encountered the attempted murder from the experts sent by Chu sect. They even had experts on the Universe God ranking list to launch the attack. However, to Jian Wushuang, it was a great reward that he could fight a battle against an expert on the Universe God ranking list. To obtain another chance to enter Real God Hall, after the completion of the task, the reward itself was abundant. Su Hong, my task is to escort you to Purple Moon Sanctuary. As we've arrived, for the rest of the journey you'll have to rely on yourself. Jian Wushuang looked at Su Hong. Thank you so much for escorting me on this journey. Su Hong was extremely grateful. As soon as he arrived at Purple Moon Sanctuary, the experts from Su family found him. With the experts from Su family around, Chu sect wouldn't be able to play any more tricks. In other words, he was already out of danger. Take care, Jian Wushuang said, and then turned to leave. Su Hong and Universe Gods and Hong Ri mercenary groups watched Jian Wushuang as he left. Everyone was sighing. If everything goes to plan, on the Universe God ranking list, there will be Mr. Jian Wushuang's name in no time. Definitely, to be able to fight against Zhao Han like that, he definitely will enter Universe God ranking list. From what I can see, not only will Jian Wushuang be listed on the Universe God ranking list, his ranking will surpass Zhao Han's in no time. TSK, when will I be able to have Mr. Jian Wushuang's power? Chapter 1448, Sky Sword Mountain. Chapter 1448, Sky Sword Mountain. After Jian Wushuang had parted ways with Su Hong, he found a bar and sat down. At the same time, he sent a message to Hall Master Yuan to inform him that he had already completed the second part of the task. Jian Wushuang, I heard that you met an expert on Universe God ranking list, Zhao Han, in your second part of the task? How do you feel? Hall Master Yuan asked casually. The expert on Universe God ranking list was really strong, Jian Wushuang solemnly said. According to my power now, I could barely match Zhao Han evenly. If I intend to defeat him, I have to have a breakthrough on my sword principle again, and create a unique skill of real God level. On sword principle unique skill, he had already created the rank 3 strongest unique skill, enduring samsara. Hence, to be stronger, he naturally had to create a real God unique skill. Hearing what Jian Wushuang said, the king of venomous worms couldn't help but mutter. If it wasn't because you had to protect Su Hong, you could totally try to keep Zhao Han behind and replace him easily on Universe God ranking list. Jian Wushuang smiled in reply. Previously, when Jian Wushuang was fighting against Zhao Han, myriad beast idols countercharged Zhao Han's body too vigorously, and he wasn't able to withstand for long. If they were to continue to fight, Jian Wushuang could definitely defeat him, or even kill him. However, the victory would depend on his divine power and King of Venomous Worms' recovery power. As for his real power, he was really slightly weaker than Zhao Han. Regardless, you performed well to be able to fight against Zhao Han like that. Considering your ability now, I can be less worried about the third part of the task, Hall Master Yuan said. Huh? Jian Wushuang was surprised. The way Hall Master Yuan spoke made the third part of the task seemed unusual. Jian Wushuang, I shall assign you the third part of your task, also the last part. Listen carefully, Hall Master said. Jian Wushuang listened with full attention. The 10 cultivation sanctuaries, which are outside of the boundless void, in between Holy Kingdom of Green Thunder and Holy Kingdom of Illusionary Sea, there is a huge piece of land. This land is where the Sky Sword Mountain is located. Sky Sword Mountain is an extremely strong force in eternal chaotic world. Although they aren't within the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, the overall power they contain isn't ordinary. Even compared to us lineage of star, they aren't that far off. Jian Wushuang was shocked when he heard that. A force that wasn't much weaker the lineage of star was definitely at the top in eternal chaotic world. Back when I followed King Luozhen to wander around in the eternal chaotic world, I've heard of Sky Sword Mountain. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain is extremely hard to deal with. King of Venomous Worms' voice was heard. Hall Master Yuan continued. Sky Sword Mountain has many experts and also many real gods. Besides, Sky Sword Mountain has a total of 108 white deacons. These white deacons are all peak Universe God in the third heaven. Among them, there is Universe God Mo Yen. He once joined forces with a bunch of Universe God in Purple Moon Sanctuary to kill one of the disciples of Lineage of Star. Your task is to head over to Sky Sword Mountain and find an opportunity to kill Universe God Mo Yen. Head to Sky Sword Mountain to kill Universe God Mo Yen. He's the only target? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes, just killing him will do, Hall Master Yuan replied. How strong is Universe God Mo Yen? Was he on the Universe God ranking list, or close to having fighting power, like one on Universe God ranking list? Jian Wushuang asked again. No, he isn't strong. He's just an ordinary peak Universe God in the third heaven, Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows when he heard Hall Master Yuan's reply. Only to kill an ordinary Universe God in the third heaven? The task seemed quite easy. But it was the final part of the task. Jian Wushuang, although Universe God Mo Yen wasn't strong, he is from Sky Sword Mountain after all. Plus he is very cunning. He has been staying in Sky Sword Mountain all these years, and he has never left. You have to kill him in Sky Sword Mountain. If you were to kill him, under the watch of many experts in Sky Sword Mountain. If you make any careless mistakes, you'll be chased after by the experts in Sky Sword Mountain, even if you kill him. In turn, you might lose your life, Hall Master Yuan said. Is that right? Jian Wushuang's face grew solemn. He knew that killing Universe God Mo Yen was an easy task. The crucial part of the task was that he had to escape from Sky Sword Mountain after he had killed him, or he wasn't discovered by anyone after he killed Universe God Mo Yen. Hence, the difficulty of the task instantly became a few times higher. The reward for the third part of the task is for you to stay in Real God Hall for 2 months, and on top of that, you'll be rewarded with a Chaos Unique Treasure of Real God level. Hall Master Yuan said. Jian Wushuang immediately beamed with joy. It was unnecessary to talk about Real God Hall. For the second part of the task, he was only allowed to be in Real God Hall for a month's time. However, upon completion of the third part of the task, he could stay for 2 months. As for the Chaos Unique Treasure of Real God level, in Eternal Chaotic World, the treasures were segregated into Chaos Divine Weapon, Chaos Unique Treasure, and Chaos Divine Treasure. Among Chaos Unique Treasure, there was a difference between Universe God and Real God levels. The name itself revealed that Chaos Unique Treasure of Universe God level was for Universe God, while Chaos Unique Treasure of Real God level was for Real God. For instance, among the treasures that Jian Wushuang had, Blaze Quicksand Gourd could only be considered a higher class Chaos Unique Treasure of Universe God level. Blood Mountain Sword was just an embryo sword. By then it had already merged with the strongest unique skill in the third heaven that Jian Wushuang created. The eruption of its power could be compared favorably with the top-notch Chaos Unique Treasure of Universe God level. Blood-Killing Plate Armor could also be considered as a top-notch Chaos Unique Treasure of Universe God level. As for Real God level, Jian Wushuang really didn't have any. He possessed Mountain River Map, which was a Chaos Divine Treasure. It was a pity that, due to its high level, Jian Wushuang couldn't give full play to its power. He reckoned that he could only use the treasure after he became a real god. Hence, if he were to obtain Chaos Unique Treasure of Real God level at such a critical point, it would definitely be useful to Jian Wushuang. Although the third part of the task is very dangerous, the reward is generous, Jian Wushuang smiled. Opportunity and danger coexisted. Jian Wushuang, let me remind you that the third part of the task is not ordinary. You might lose your life if you make any careless mistake. Hence, before you launch an attack to kill Universe God Mo Yen, be well prepared. Keep an escape route open. If you aren't well prepared, don't act hastily, Hall Master Yuan exhorted. Understood, Jian Wushuang nodded heavily. Besides, if you were to be in life-threatening situation, tell them your identity as a disciple of Star Palace directly. You might stand a chance, Hall Master Yuan said again. Jian Wushuang's eyes contracted, and then he nodded. I sent you the location of Sky Sword Mountain. Go ahead. Hall Master Yuan cut off their communication. Jian Wushuang departed shortly after. Chapter 1449, Nine Sword Mountains. Chapter 1449, Nine Sword Mountains. A huge piece of land was located in between two holy kingdoms. The piece of land was where Sky Sword Mountain was. Jian Wushuang spent another 10 years traveling by spaceship and went through the boundless void once again. He then appeared on the land. This is Sky Sword Mountain. Jian Wushuang looked over the huge piece of land before his eyes, and he could faintly see the 9 lofty mountains at the end of his view. Even though he was at a far distance, Jian Wushuang could feel the boundless aura of the 9 mountains. It is said that there are 9 sword mountains in Sky Sword Mountain, and the 9 sword mountains were made by the owner of Sky Sword Mountain himself. It is said to be impressive. King of Venomous Worm's voice was heard in his head. Let's take a look. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. After he got off the spaceship, he relied on his own speed to travel to the 9 loft sword mountains at the end of his sight. After a short while, Jian Wushuang appeared in the huge, empty land. In the empty land, there were many cultivators gathered together. Some were chatting casually, some were practicing swordsmanship, but a lot more of them were closing their eyes as they sat there. It seemed that they were comprehending something. Jian Wushuang stood on the empty land and lifted his gaze to look at the 9 mountains before him. The 9 mountains gave everyone an extremely magnificent feeling. Just as Jian Wushuang looked at the first huge mountain, Virum, a terrifying sword intention spread over. The sword intention spread with great momentum that made people submit. This sword intention. Jian Wushuang's eyes contracted suddenly, and his mind and soul immediately drowned in the sword intention. It was quite some time until Jian Wushuang came back to reality. I am drowned by the sword intention? Jian Wushuang was shocked. With his understanding of swordsmanship, he wouldn't be bothered with ordinary sword intention. However, the sword intention spread by the lofty mountain made him drown uncontrollably. Just how strong was the sword intention? Jian Wushuang immediately looked at the second mountain, Virum. Similarly, a terrifying sword intention spread over, but it was like all rivers running into the sea. It included everything in the universe. Jian Wushuang was affected by the sword intention and drowned uncontrollably. After a short while, so magical, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes and they beamed with excitement. The 9 lofty mountains, every one of them contained a terrifying sword intention. The strength of the sword intention was so enchanting, and one would automatically submit. 9 unique mountains. If he were to cultivate and comprehend there for a short while, his swordsmanship would definitely improve tremendously. My friend, a gentle voice was heard. Jian Wushuang turned around and looked. He saw an old man in a white robe walking towards him. The old man in a white robe looked at him in a friendly way. You are? Jian Wushuang looked at the person approaching him. I am the White Deacon of Sky Sword Mountain Bing Song. The elderly in a white robe smiled. White Deacon? Jian Wushuang looked shocked. One must know that the target of the task, Universe God Mo Yen, was also a White Deacon of Sky Sword Mountain, who shared the same position as Bing Kong. Looking at your reaction, it should be your first time in Sky Sword Mountain, right? Bing Song smiled as he looked at Jian Wushuang. Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded. Well, of course. Only cultivators who are in Sky Sword Mountain for the first time would be so shocked when they see the 9 sword mountains. Bing Song smiled and continued. The 9 sword mountains are the foundation of Sky Sword Mountain, also made by our owner. The 9 sword mountains, every one of them contains terrifying sword intention. Also, it's the best place for cultivators of swordsmanship to comprehend and cultivate. No wonder there are so many sword cultivators here. Jian Wushuang looked around and saw the cultivators on the empty land were mostly sword cultivators. The purpose of your visit will be the same as the rest, right? Bing Song looked at Jian Wushuang. He had already noticed the sword that Jian Wushuang was carrying on his back. Of course. Jian Wushuang nodded and asked, Mr. Bing Song, if I were to intend to comprehend and cultivate before the 9 sword mountains, what would be the criteria? Criteria? There are no criteria. Our owner exhorted us long ago that the 9 sword mountains were open to all sword cultivators. Regardless of who they are, they can comprehend sword intentions before any sword mountain, and for however long they want, Bing Song said. What? Jian Wushuang was shocked. 9 such impressive sword mountains are open to the public? Just how generous is the owner of Sky Sword Mountain? One must know that there were many forces and sects in eternal chaotic world, and they possessed some land of opportunities. But even their disciples had a certain limitation, let alone outsiders. For instance, in Lineage of Star, only the disciples of Star Palace were permitted to enter Real God Hall, Scripture Depository, and Reset Palace. But Sky Sword Mountain, from Jian Wushuang point of view, although the 9 sword mountains couldn't be compared to Real God Hall favorably, it was a rare cultivation place. Especially for sword cultivators, it was definitely a chance that was hard to come by. But the owner of Sky Sword Mountain had opened the 9 sword mountains to public. That was very generous of him. There were many places for comprehension and cultivation on the empty land. You can pick anywhere you like to cultivate on your own. You can cultivate for however long you wish, but remember to not break Sky Sword Mountain's rule. Bing Song said. Rule? What rule? Jian Wushuang asked. Very simple. Just don't kill anyone in Sky Sword Mountain, Bing Song said. Jian Wushuang's eyes contracted. The aim of his visit to Sky Sword Mountain was to kill someone. It seemed that he definitely had to break Sky Sword Mountain's rule. What would happen if one accidentally broke Sky Sword Mountain's rule? Jian Wushuang asked casually. One who breaks the rule will be punished in Sky Sword Mountain, which means, Bing Song sighed with emotion. What will happen? Jian Wushuang asked curiously. I don't know. But Bing Song shook his head and continued. It is the higher-up who is of real god level in Sky Sword Mountain, who is in charge of punishment after all. But I've heard that rule breakers end very tragically. Oh. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows slightly. All right, friend. Take your time to comprehend and cultivate. If there's any problem, you can look for me. We are the White Deacon after all, and we are obliged to take care of trivial matters. Bing Song smiled and turned to leave. Jian Wushuang stood there quietly as a strange light shimmered in his eyes. There are so many experts in Sky Sword Mountain. There are even so many real gods. To kill under the watch of so many experts, it definitely will not be easy. But I'm not in a hurry either. I'll stay under the 9 Sword Mountains to comprehend slowly and get to know the environment better. Then, I'll look for an opportunity to take action. Chapter 1450, Universe God Mo Yen. Chapter 1450, Universe God Mo Yen. After Jian Wushuang had made up his mind, he immediately found a space and sat down while his gaze fixed on the 9 lofty sword mountains in front of him. Every one of the 9 sword mountains contained boundless sword intention, and all 9 of them were different. Jian Wushuang could feel every single one of the sword intentions. After a while, Jian Wushuang chose one of the sword mountains. The sword mountain contained an extremely swift and fierce sword intention that seemed to be able to tear the universe. It was extremely similar to Jian Wushuang's sword intention. According to Jian Wushuang's understanding towards the sword aimed to kill, and it originally contained boundless spearheads. Only a rusty sword would lose its swiftness. Jian Wushuang started to comprehend in silence and feel the sword intention of the sword mountain. Along with the comprehension, his understanding towards the sword principle and sword intention continuously increased. The time slowly passed. Sky Sword Mountain had strict rules that no one dared to break. Jian Wushuang stayed silent as he comprehended. No one came to interrupt him either. In the blink of an eye, it had been 70 years. Jian Wushuang already stood up from the ground. Then, he held Blood Mountain sword with his eyes still closed, but Blood Mountain sword started to be wielded slowly. Whistle! A ray of sword light suddenly flashed. The sword light was like a frightened swan. It suddenly swept past. However, at the instant when the sword light pierced through, an extremely terrifying fierce aura suddenly erupted. A terrifying stroke. The stroke even attracted many cultivators' attention. Rank 3 strongest unique skill. The sword principle is so swift and fierce. Such swift and fierce stroke carries a power that can't be blocked. I definitely couldn't withstand that stroke. The cultivators complimented in silence. There were many sword principle cultivators, but there weren't many who had reached the level of peak universe god in the 3rd heaven. One who could create a rank 3 strongest unique skill was even more scarce. Hence, the sword principle that Jian Wushuang performed received their compliments. After Jian Wushuang had performed his sword principle, he immediately stored his sword and slowly opened his eyes. Phew! Jian Wushuang let out a breath of relief and revealed a smile across his face. After comprehension for 70 years on the Sword Mountain, my understanding toward sword principle has increased tremendously. Although I still have yet to create a unique skill of real god level, I have created the 2nd rank 3 strongest unique skill besides enduring samsara. This stroke advances bravely. It won't stop without tearing apart or eliminating the person. As the sword light swings out, it is like a frightened swan. As such, the stroke should be named Frightened Swan. Jian Wushuang smiled. Frightened Swan stroke was created and Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship was one step closer to perfection. In Sky Sword Mountain there were many buildings. Among these buildings there were stores, bars and also entertainment places. He was in front of a store then. Take your leave leisurely. A malicious youth in a white robe said humbly as he sent 2 peak universe gods in the 3rd heaven away. Sorry for giving you so much trouble. The 2 peak universe gods in the 3rd heaven didn't act haughtily, but one of them took out his Qian Kuan ring. This is a token of appreciation, please take it. The malicious-looking youth in a white robe beamed with joy and accepted it. If you were to come across any trouble in Sky Sword Mountain in the future, Come and look for me. Sure. The two peak universe gods in the third heaven left very soon after. The malicious-looking youth in white robe watched the two of them left, and immediately ran through the Qianquan ring. Then, he immediately wore a satisfying smile across his face as he walked into the store again. Jian Wushuang, who was in the bar opposite the store, saw the scene. Universe God Mo Yen. Jian Wushuang's gaze was fixed on the malicious-looking youth in the white robe. His soul power covered the store entirely then. Universe God Mo Yen is really cunning. I've been in Sky Sword Mountain for 70 years, but I've never seen him leave the mountain. Plus, even when he's in Sky Sword Mountain, he normally stays in the store. In the nearby stores, there are at least 4 real gods. Jian Wushuang sighed in silence. He had waited in Sky Sword Mountain for 70 years. In the 70 years, most of the time he had comprehended at the Sword Mountain. But he was looking for a chance to take action simultaneously. However, for 70 years, he had never found any chance to take action. In the end, Jian Wushuang concluded that if he wanted to kill Universe God Mo Yen, he could only do it in the store, under the watch of the 4 real gods. If it were to be any ordinary cultivator, even if he was an expert of real god level, to kill Universe God Mo Yen, under the watch of 4 real gods, and leave would be almost impossible. However, I might stand a chance, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. He was different from ordinary cultivators. After all, he was good at soul attacks. The scariest part about soul attacks were that he could kill his opponent quietly without much movement. Although the 4 real gods are nearby, it is impossible for them to disperse their consciousness at all times to pay close attention to their surroundings. Even if someone died near them, as long as there was no noise, no eruption of divine power, they shouldn't be able to discover it. This is my chance. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Universe God Mo Yen, although he is a peak universe god in the third heaven, he isn't strong in consciousness. He should only be at the level of an ordinary universe god in the third heaven. According to my current soul strength, if I were to perform the inextinguishable light with the secret skill of Tian Yuan with full force, the sudden attack should have a high, 70% chance to be able to kill him. A 70% success rate is already very high. After killing him, I will leave immediately. By the time the real gods realize, I should be out of Sky Sword Mountain. Jian Wushuang thought it through again, and decided to take action. Immediately, Jian Wushuang left the bar, and walked into the store opposite Universe God Mo Yen. Jian Wushuang arrived in the store, and he saw the malicious-looking youth in a white robe, who was inspecting a ton at the desk, Universe God Mo Yen. Besides Universe God Mo Yen, there were 2 servants at the entrance of the store. Universe God Mo Yan's eyes beamed with joy the moment he saw Jian Wushuang enter. He could feel Jian Wushuang's aura, which revealed him to be a peak universe god in the third heaven. On Sky Sword Mountain, peak universe gods in the third heaven were all big customers. Mister, how can I help you? Universe God Mo Yen stood up and asked with a smile. I need a few elixirs to help to stabilize my mind and body. It must be of a higher level. I wonder if you sell them? Jian Wushuang asked. Of course. But we at Sky Sword Mountain sell things at a higher price compared to other places. I wonder if Mr. can accept this? Universe God Mo Yen asked again. Chapter 1451 Sudden Change. Chapter 1451 Sudden Change. I want an elixir. As for chaos gems, it wouldn't be a problem, Jian Wushuang said. If so, please follow me to the secret room for further discussion, Universe God Mo Yen said. Secret room. Jian Wushuang was happy, but he wore a poker face, sure. Please. Under the lead of Universe God Mo Yen, Jian Wushuang walked into the secret room in the interior of the shop. On the way, Jian Wushuang took out a token secretly. The token was a mirror token, specially used to record the mirror image. The mirror image was also the item that Jian Wushuang used to prove that he had completed the task alone. Universe God Mo Yen led Jian Wushuang, and they arrived at the secret room. There was a glimmer of light in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and his soul power covered the surroundings. He instantly determined that it was the best time for him to take action. Universe God Mo Yen. Jian Wushuang suddenly spoke. Huh, how did you know my name? Universe God Mo Yen turned around in surprise. Just as he turned, a silent soul light pierced into him without any sign. Too fast, and they were too close to one another. Universe God Mo Yen couldn't respond at all. The soul light hit his consciousness and destroyed his consciousness easily, like breaking dead wood. Universe God Mo Yen stared but didn't make any sound. His body was still standing but never fell. However, his aura had already dispersed. Success! Jian Wushuang tightened his grip. Just as he had expected, Universe God Mo Yam's consciousness strength was of a normal standard among peak universe gods in the third heaven. He performed the second layer of the secret skill of Tian Yuan with his inextinguishable light, and under the condition that caught Universe God Mo Yen by surprise, it was not possible for him to block the attack. His consciousness was destroyed directly. After he killed Universe God Mo Yen, Jian Wushuang took away his Qian Kuan ring. Then he didn't stay any longer in the private room, but left the shop directly. Jian Wushuang looked calm as he walked to the entrance of the shop. The two attendants bowed at him politely, but didn't notice anything unusual. Jian Wushuang left the shop without hindrance. Everything was just as planned. As long as there's no movement, there shouldn't be anyone who notices Universe God Mo Yan's death. Before they react, I should already leave the place. They won't be able to catch me in time. The third part of the task isn't as difficult as I'd imagined. Jian Wushuang smiled as he prepared to leave Sky Sword Mountain swiftly. Humph! How dare you kill in Sky Sword Mountain? You have guts. An angry bellow that seemed to be from out of the highest heaven suddenly reverberated through Sky Sword Mountain. The voice was as loud as thunder, and it shook all the cultivators in Sky Sword Mountain. Rumble! A terrifying power instantly concentrated in the sky above. What? Jian Wushuang's face changed. He lifted his head in shock and realized that there was a huge hand towering above his head. The towering, huge hand was moving towards him slowly. It made Jian Wushuang feel as though his head was exploding, and there was an unprecedented fear growing in him. It's almighty, it's almighty! The king of venomous worms' voice and groan was suddenly heard in Jian Wushuang's head. How is this possible? Jian Wushuang was in disbelief. He was confident that he had done it flawlessly. The real gods in Sky Sword Mountain has yet to notice Universe God Mo Yan's death, and he could totally escape. However, he had never expected that the real god wouldn't notice, but the most terrifying existence on Sky Sword Mountain, the owner of Sky Sword Mountain, would instead. After the owner of Sky Sword Mountain found out, he took action against him immediately. The Almighty took action on his own. Even Jian Wushuang felt hopeless. In and out of Sky Sword Mountain, countless cultivators, including various real gods, looked up in terror. All of them were staring at the towering hand. This is the Almighty's doing. In Sky Sword Mountain, there's only one Almighty. Who is the owner of Sky Sword Mountain? Who is it? He provoked the owner of Sky Sword Mountain to take action himself? Killing in Sky Sword Mountain? And caught by the owner of Sky Sword Mountain himself. TSK. This person is doomed. Everyone was greatly astonished and pitied Jian Wushuang. Rumble. The towering hand slowly descended. It looked slow, but there was a feeling that soared up in Jian Wushuang that he couldn't resist or avoid it. He could only stand there and watch as he waited for the huge hand to eliminate him. He had no power to struggle nor fight back. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain, I'm a disciple of Star Palace, Jian Wushuang shouted in madness. His voice spread across the entire Sky Sword Mountain. It was Jian Wushuang's last chance. He could only hope for the owner of Sky Sword Mountain to be lenient because of the lineage of Star. Humph! So what if you are the disciple of Star Palace? This is Sky Sword Mountain. No one has the right to violate my rules here in Sky Sword Mountain. However, as you are only a universe god, I will not kill you. I will send you to Sky Sword Prison for you to perish. The magnificent voice reverberated in the universe once again. After it was done, the towering hand suddenly increased in speed, and clawed towards Jian Wushuang at lightning speed. Jian Wushuang had no power to fight back, and he could only watch as the towering hand picked him up like a chick and threw him. There was a wormhole that appeared in the surrounding void, and Jian Wushuang's figure instantly drowned in the wormhole and disappeared. After it did all that, the towering hand slowly dispersed and the magnificent voice wasn't heard again. The entire Sky Sword Mountain resumed its silence. However, the countless cultivators on Sky Sword Mountain, including the real gods, were still astonished. Earlier, when the hand descended, I felt like the sky was going to collapse. I had no intention to fight back. It was too scary. Almighty, it's an Almighty's way. The universe god is imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison by the owner of Sky Sword Mountain. Sky Sword Prison? Where's that? You don't know? TSK. It is widely recognized by the nearby 72 holy kingdoms that it is the scariest place. Even the real gods would be petrified if they heard the name. A universe god who is imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison. I'm afraid he will stand no hope to get out of it. However, he was audacious enough to kill in Sky Sword Mountain, so he deserved it. The cultivators in Sky Sword Mountain continued to discuss among themselves. It only subsided after a few days. Very soon, Sky Sword Mountain resumed its tranquility. Chapter 1452 Sky Sword Prison. Chapter 1452 Sky Sword Prison. The place was in complete isolation from the outside world. It was a boundless crimson land called Sky Sword Prison. Crimson sky and dark boundless ground. There was a pungent blood smell in the air. Virum. A part of the void suddenly distorted, and was then followed by a flowing light that erupted from the distorted void. Its speed was extremely swift, and it slammed down at the bare mountain. Bang! A loud thud. Then the mountain exploded entirely as shattered debris dispersed. Underneath the broken stones, a figure struggled and stood up slowly. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain is quite brutal. Luckily, my divine body is extremely strong, and I can withstand such strong impact. Otherwise, if I were to be any ordinary peak universe god in the third heaven, from the slam on the mountain, I'd already have lost my skin. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows as he felt the churning blood in his body. Very soon he recovered his body status. This is... Jian Wushuang looked around as he swept out his soul power. He realized that his soul power was hindered, and the range he covered was barely 1/5 of what he could in the outside world. This space is extremely strange, Jian Wushuang muttered and immediately took out a token. He tried to send a message to Hall Master Yuan, but the message couldn't be sent. He was surprised by that. He understood that he was in Sky Sword Prison, that the owner of Sky Sword Mountain mentioned earlier. As it was a prison, it naturally wouldn't be an ordinary one. If one could communicate with people in the outside world, it wouldn't be called a prison. I'm in big trouble, Jian Wushuang sighed. He never thought that the owner of Sky Sword Mountain would notice, during the process of him completing his task, and that he would imprison him in Sky Sword Prison. He had once heard that Sky Sword Prison was an extremely terrifying place during his 70 years in Sky Sword Mountain. It seemed that most of the people who broke the rules on Sky Sword Mountain would be imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison. However, the people in the outside world only knew of the existence of the prison. No one knew where the prison was, or what would one encounter in the prison. Although it's a troublesome situation, it's much better than losing my life straight away. Plus, I already revealed my identity when I was thrown into this prison. Hall Master Yuan should find out that I'm detained from the owner of Sky Sword Mountain very soon, and he should be figuring out a way to save me. However, before that, I'll need to figure a way to stay alive in here. Jian Wushuang looked around with a solemn look. He could clearly feel the bloody scent in the air. Such a pungent bloody scent showed that Sky Sword Prison must be going through a mad massacre all the time. After he had thought for a while, Jian Wushuang plunged towards a direction. He was very slow in speed. He didn't know much about Sky Sword Prison after all. He naturally didn't dare to barge in. 3 days later. A vague shadow in a luxuriantly grown bush suddenly lifted its head. Through the gaps among the tree leaves, he could see that there was a young man in red robe, carrying a sword behind his back appeared in the void above, and flew past the top of his head. Red robe? Sword? This look, I've never seen it. Could he be a newcomer? Jia, here comes the opportunity. The vague shadow was overjoyed. He stared at the young man in red robe's eyes above, and he was beaming with excitement too. The aura all over his body was hidden to its limit, and it could be said that it was flawless. Right at that moment, the young man in the red robe flew past the top of his head. Swoosh! The vague shadow suddenly plunged like a cheetah. The speed was too swift. He swept up from the bush below, but instantly appeared in the sky 1,000 miles above, and appeared behind the young man in red robe. Then pust! An extremely sharp claw that could tear the sky suddenly descended, and a terrifying murderous intention exploded. At such a close distance, this boy will be doomed. The vague shadow saw that the young man in the red robe couldn't find him at the first instance, and he relaxed. Just as he slashed the sharp claws at the young man in the red robe, the young man who had been facing him suddenly turned around. At the moment he turned around, his eyes flashed out a crimson light. The crimson light was like a crimson sun, extremely harsh to the eye, yet eye-catching. It was Jian Wushuang's 18 Azura Hell. One must know that Jian Wushuang had already lit up his soul fire, and his soul power was spread around him all the time. Although the vague shadow had hidden among the bush without any sign, it was almost impossible to hide from the probe of Jian Wushuang's soul power. Jian Wushuang had noticed the existence of the vague shadow long ago. He hadn't exposed him. When the vague shadow launched an attack, he suddenly performed his technique. The vague shadow saw the crimson sun immediately, and suddenly drowned in a phantasmagoria. Humph! The vague shadow quickly shook off from the dreamland and harumphed. He swept out his sharp claws, and then continued to explode with action, after pausing for just a short while. You resisted my 18 Azura Hell so easily? Jian Wushuang was shocked but immediately wielded his sword. A terrifying sword intention suddenly erupted. Dang! 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 Jian Wushuang exchanged blows with the vague shadow at lightning speed. In an instant, they had already slashed thrice. The impact from the 3 collisions made Jian Wushuang take 2 steps back, but the vague shadow grew imposing, and its body turned into a 2-meter-tall, golden exotic beast. The exotic beast used its claws and slashed. Kacha. Jian Wushuang could faintly hear that there was an explosive sound in the air. Its terrifying power made Jian Wushuang grow distressed. Go away! Jian Wushuang's blood mountain sword immediately erupted with a terrifying scarlet light. The slight bit of power of reincarnation that he had comprehended suddenly flowed into his sword principle, and increased the power tremendously. Rumble! The sword light and the claw collided directly, and the 2 bolts of terrifying power exploded. The golden exotic beast that the vague shadow had turned into flew off from the attack directly. 3rd level. Just as the golden exotic beast retreated, it exclaimed in surprise. After he steadied himself, he didn't hesitate, but turned around to run away. Want to escape? Jian Wushuang's face grew cold, and he took out a gold calabash. Rumble! A large amount of blazing quicksand flowed out, and instantly flooded the vast void. The golden exotic beast was engulfed within, and the quicksand region immediately took effect. Chapter 1453, Experts in the Prison. Chapter 1453, Experts in the Prison. Regional Treasure. The golden exotic beast noticed the regional power from the surrounding, and it felt stressed. But then its back suddenly grew a pair of golden wings. With the golden wings, its traveling speed suddenly increased, and it flew through the quicksand instantly. Although the blazing quicksand formed pressure, it couldn't stop the beast. In the blink of an eye, the golden exotic beast dashed out from the blazing quicksand region. He ran away? Jian Wushuang's facial expression changed. In the nearby void, after the golden exotic beast ran away from the glazing quicksand, it stopped. Then, the golden exotic beast slowly dispersed, and revealed its original appearance of a human man. He was a skinny, cold-looking young man. The young man's eyes looked devilish, and he was looking at Jian Wushuang. Newbie, not too shabby, the young man smiled. Who are you? Jian Wushuang stared at the young man. I'm Luo Meng. I was once famous in one of the holy kingdoms. But now, just like you, I'm a pathetic prisoner of Sky Sword Prison. The young man Luo Meng made fun of himself. How long have you been imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison? Jian Wushuang asked. Not long. About 80,000 years. Luo Meng replied at ease, but, in actual fact, he already knew just how dangerous it was to live in Sky Sword Prison. Newbie, let me remind you. Although you're quite powerful, stronger than I am, there are many people who could kill you in Sky Sword Prison. Hence, you'd better not move around the prison as you wish. It'd be best if you were to be like me, find a spot to hide. Then you'll be able to live, Luo Meng said. We are all people who are imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison. I've never once provoked them. Why would they want to kill me? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows and asked. It seems that you don't know anything about the rules in Sky Sword Prison. But that makes sense. When I was first thrown in Sky Sword Prison, I was just like you. Luo Meng smiled faintly and continued. It is rare to come across a newbie in Sky Sword Prison. I might as well share what I know with you. It is needless for me to explain about the origins of Sky Sword Prison. It was created by the owner of Sky Sword Mountain especially to imprison experts. Ever since Sky Sword Prison existed, there have been more than a few millions of experts, or maybe a few billions experts imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison over the years. Why are there be so many? Jian Wushuang didn't understand. Sky Sword Mountain was famous in Eternal Chaotic World, and the owner of Sky Sword Mountain was an almighty. Generally speaking, there would be almost none who had the guts to offend such a strong force. For instance, he himself had only offended the owner of Sky Sword Mountain in order to complete the task that lineage of star assigned. Otherwise, he wouldn't offend such a powerful force. As there was no one who had the guts to provoke him, why would there be so many experts imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison? You thought only those who offended Sky Sword Mountain would be imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison? Luo Meng sneered at him. Let me tell you, among the cultivators who are imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison, 99% of them weren't imprisoned in Sky Sword Mountain because they offended Sky Sword Mountain, but because they committed crimes in various holy kingdoms. Some of them massacred, some offended experts of a higher level, some were dragged in. In short, there are many reasons to be imprisoned. Like me, I am imprisoned due to my connections with my own sect. Connections? Jian Wushuang was confused. The sect that I was in was destroyed entirely because we offended the royal in the holy kingdom that we were in. Then, universe gods who were in the third heaven and above from the sect were sent to Sky Sword Prison. Naturally, it included me. Luo Meng smiled faintly. From what I know, the owner of Sky Sword Mountain, who created Sky Sword Prison, looks like he only controlled Sky Sword Mountain. But in actual fact, he controls a total of 72 holy kingdoms in Eternal Chaotic World. They are all appendages to Sky Sword Mountain. Among the 72 holy kingdoms, whichever cultivator conducted iniquity or offended the royal cultivators, any universe god below the third heaven would be eliminated directly, while cultivators who were of a level higher than universe god in the third heaven would be sent into Sky Sword Prison. After all these years, tell me, just how many cultivators are there who have been imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison? Jian Wushuang asked, and he was astonished. A total of 72 holy kingdoms. Holy kingdoms? Although it was far beyond comparison with cultivation sanctuaries. A holy kingdom covered a wide expanse of territory, and the number of cultivators was huge. It was definitely an astronomical figure. There were countless universe gods in the holy kingdom. Of course, there would be some real gods too. A total of 72 holy kingdoms. Then there must be an even larger number of cultivators. Over the years, there was definitely a large number of universe god in the third heaven who had committed crime or offended a royal member. The number of a few million or a few billion was normal. Not long after the cultivators were imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison, the owner of Sky Sword Mountain set a rule for Sky Sword Prison. All prisoners in the prison could kill other prisoners in exchange for an opportunity to leave. A universe god in the third heaven is required to kill 100 cultivators of the same level, or 10 real gods who are above his level. Then he can leave. As for real god, they have to kill 1,000 universe gods in the third heaven to be able to leave. Sky Sword Prison has a unique ability. It can gauge how many people you killed in the prison. Generally, there won't be a mistake. It is the only chance for us prisoners to leave Sky Sword Prison, Luo Meng explained. Oh, I see. No wonder. You said that the prisoners in Sky Sword Prison, including yourself, would want to kill me. Jian Wushuang nodded as he understood. But he suddenly responded. You said earlier that there are real gods imprisoned here too. Yes, quite a number of them, Luo Meng said. Real gods are far stronger than universe gods in the third heaven. Even the weakest real god should be able to create a massacre in the prison. It shouldn't be difficult to kill 1,000 universe gods in the third heaven, right? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows and asked. It isn't as easy as you thought it'd be. Luo Meng smiled. In Sky Sword Prison, comparing real gods with universe gods in the third heaven, the ratio wasn't as one-sided. After all cultivators who are imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison are restricted by the limitation in Sky Sword Prison. Everyone's divine power is capped at the level of a peak universe god in the third heaven. In other words, even if one were a real god who was extremely powerful, his divine power would be capped at the level of a peak universe god in the third heaven while he's in here. Chapter 1454 4 Levels. Chapter 1454 4 Levels. I see. Jian Wushuang understood. Although real gods were much stronger than universe god in the third heaven, the difference was mainly in divine power. When the divine power of an expert of real god rank erupted, it was far beyond a universe god in the third heaven. Forget about the eruption of divine power. The advantage a real god had over a universe god of the third heaven wasn't that big. For instance, many universe gods in the third heaven were much stronger than real gods in unique skill and comprehension of the power of Heaven Wei. As such, it wouldn't be as easy for a real god to kill 1,000 universe gods in the third heaven. Forget about the fact that the divine power of real god is restrained. It wouldn't be that easy to kill a universe god in the third heaven. Even if the real god really had an exceedingly great power, the most crucial part is that there aren't that many cultivators in Sky Sword Prison. Luo Meng smiled. Not many. How many are there? Jian Wushuang asked. Throughout the years, there were millions or even tens of millions of cultivators that were imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison. However, these cultivators live by endless massacres. How many are left? From what I know, adding up all cultivators in Sky Sword Prison currency, there shouldn't be more than 1,500 of them. Plus, the 1,500 cultivators who are able to live through endless massacres and stay alive must be extremely capable. Most importantly, they possess strong survival ability. Even if the two were different in power, it would be difficult for them to kill one another, Luo Meng said. Jian Wushuang understood. He had fought against Luo Meng earlier, and he was much stronger than Luo Meng, but Jian Wushuang couldn't make him stay. It was because Luo Meng was extremely fast and had extremely strong survival skills. With his speed, even if he were to encounter any ordinary real god in Sky Sword Prison, he should be able to survive. It'd be impossible to achieve the owner of Sky Sword Prison's criteria to leave in a short period of time. So every one of us is enduring it, Luo Meng said. After all these years, there are some experts that achieved his criteria and left Sky Sword Prison alive. Jian Wushuang nodded in silence and finally understood Lei Meng's feelings when he said that he was only a poor prisoner. Newbie, what's your name? Luo Meng suddenly asked. Jian Wushuang, Jian Wushuang replied. Jian Wushuang, as you have chatted with me for so long, let me give you a helping hand. Here's the information of many experts that I've collected through the 80,000 years that I've spent in Sky Sword Prison. I am giving you a copy so you have a basic understanding. If you run into any experts that you can't deal with in Sky Sword Prison, run as far as you can, Luo Meng said. Then, he waved and threw a token at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang caught it directly. Jian Wushuang, I hope that you will still be alive in Sky Sword Prison 10,000 years later. Then, Lei Meng moved and suddenly sped up. He disappeared before Jian Wushuang's eyes very quickly. Watching Lei Meng leave, Jian Wushuang muttered, I hope that you and I can leave Sky Sword Prison alive. Jian Wushuang immediately got up. Soon he found a place in the mountain and hid. Then, the token that Luo Meng had given him appeared in his hand. In the token, Luo Meng recorded the information of various experts that he knew of during the 80,000 years in Sky Sword Prison. He immediately started to read carefully. Very quickly, Jian Wushuang was surprised. There are so many real gods in Sky Sword Prison, Jian Wushuang exclaimed. Luo Meng had stayed in Sky Sword Prison for 80,000 years, and he had recorded a total of 1,466 experts on the token. Among the 1,466 experts, there were 1,381 universe gods in the third heaven, and the rest of the 85 were all real gods. However, they were restrained by the limitations of Sky Sword Prison. Hence, they could only perform divine powers of a peak universe god in the third heaven. Why is there so many? Jian Wushuang was surprised. One should know that even in 10 cultivation sanctuaries, real god experts belong to the top experts too. In 10 cultivation sanctuaries, some weaker force would only have 2 to 3 real gods who were at the highest level of fighting power. If they were to be in any holy kingdom, a real god would definitely be in existence of Overlord. Just like the Snow Kingdom that Jian Wushuang was in back then, he had only seen one real god in Snow Kingdom, which was Master of Silence Gloriette, and Master of Silence Gloriette's position in Snow Kingdom was extremely high and respectable. There was 85 similar real gods imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison. Jian Wushuang, you must clarify one thing. King of Venomous Worms suddenly spoke. In 10 cultivation sanctuaries, real gods are really top experts, but there was a difference of strength in real gods too. If I'm not mistaken, the real gods that are imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison should be real gods who are weaker. Real gods who are really at the top would definitely not be here. Besides, although real gods are powerful, to an almighty, they aren't much different from ants. With the owner of Sky Sword Mountain's power, forget about the 85 real gods that are imprisoned. Even imprisoning hundreds of real gods would be easy for them. Jian Wushuang was dumbfounded. Then he continued to read the information in the token. Lei Meng was in Sky Sword Prison for 80,000 years, and it wasn't in vain. The collection of information about the experts is quite detailed. He has even categorized the experts into 4 levels according to their power. Jian Wushuang's expression grew strange. For levels, it was the simplest method to categorize the experts in Sky Sword Prison. After all, real gods' divine power was constrained by the limitation of Sky Sword Prison. Hence, they couldn't just differentiate them as real gods and universe gods. The 4 levels that Luo Meng had come up with was rather complete. Out of the 4 levels, the weakest would be the 4th. The level was formed by universe gods in the third heaven. Generally, they only created peak rank 3 unique skill, or rank 3 strongest unique skill. Their overall power wasn't too strong. If they were to be put in the outside world in eternal chaotic world, they would be the top universe gods in the third heaven. However, in Sky Sword Prison, they were the ones at the bottom of the endless massacre. Just like Lei Meng himself, who was at the 4th level, but he was considered the top in the 4th level. The 3rd level was made up of universe gods in the third heaven, who had created real god unique skill, and those ordinary or weaker real gods. And also a few universe gods in the third heaven, who had comprehended a slight bit of the power of Heaven Way. There was quite a large number of cultivators at this level in Sky Sword Prison. While on the 2nd level, Chapter 1455 Jian Wushuang's Strength. Chapter 1455 Jian Wushuang's Strength. The 2nd level was made of real gods who comprehended a slight bit of power of Heaven Way, and also universe gods in the third heaven, who had high comprehension power towards power of Heaven Way, and were extremely powerful. In Sky Sword Prison, most of the cultivators were at the 3rd or the 4th level. There were very few who were at the second level. As for the first level, they were at the highest level in Sky Sword Prison, a bunch of experts who were on the top. There were only 4 people in the bunch of people. The 4 of them were referred to as the 4 kings. They were the epitome of unrivaled. According to Luo Meng's understanding of the 4 kings, they were all real gods that were extremely strong in power. They had extremely high comprehension power towards power of Heaven Wei. It was said that they had reached the level of the Doctrine Palace. Doctrine Palace? Jian Wushuang was confused. Jian Wushuang, Doctrine Palace is a place in the 10 cultivation sanctuaries to examine one's comprehension power towards power of Heaven Wei. Out of the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, each and every one of them have one Doctrine Palace, and there are 9 levels in the Doctrine Palace. Every level represents a different level of comprehension. Regardless of if you are comprehending the 9 Heaven God Doctrine or the Supreme 4 Doctrine, the Doctrine Palace could precisely determine your comprehension level. The first level of Doctrine Palace, although it was only the first level, would require an extremely high level of comprehension power. Like yourself, although you comprehended a slight bit of power of Heaven Wei, it is merely at the beginner level. You are far from passing through the first level of Doctrine Palace. Even Zhao Han, who fought against you in the Boundless Void previously, his comprehension of Myriad Beast Doctrine is higher than your comprehension of Reincarnation Doctrine. However, he is also far from passing through the first level of Doctrine Palace. The 4 kings, as they possess the standard of comprehension towards power of Heaven Wei of the first level in Doctrine Palace, even if they could only perform divine power, capped at the level of peak universe god in the 3rd heaven, they could still carry out their capability as real gods. It should be extremely easy to kill the current you. King of Venomous Worm's voice was heard in Jian Wushuang's head. Jian Wushuang kept quiet. According to the token, my current power should only be on the 3rd level, Jian Wushuang sighed. The 3rd level was made of real gods who were weaker and created real god-unique skills, and also universe gods in the 3rd heaven, who comprehended the power of Heaven Wei. Jian Wushuang also comprehended a slight bit of power of Heaven Wei, but he had yet to create any real god-unique skills. He was really on the 3rd level, and it wasn't the top of the 3rd level. Universe gods who comprehended the power of Heaven Wei, if they were an eternal chaotic world, they would be listed on the universe god ranking list. It is rare to see any in the outside world. However, in Sky Sword Prison, there are a total of 10 universe gods who have comprehended the power of Heaven Wei. So many of them. Jian Wushuang was amazed. Over so years, there have been so many universe gods in the 3rd heaven, who are imprisoned, and in such a mad massacre environment where the fittest survive. It's no surprise that it gives birth to many experts who possess fighting power, like one on the universe god ranking list. King of Venomous Worms scoffed. Jian Wushuang, I remind you to not be puzzled by the surface phenomena. Even in the 10 cultivation sanctuaries, although the universe god ranking list has gathered the top universe gods experts, the experts are only those who have revealed their capability and stepped into the limelight. However, in the 10 cultivation sanctuaries and the entire expanse of eternal chaotic world, among the countless holy kingdoms, there are many experts. They possess fighting power like one on the universe god ranking list, but they never once reveal their power, nor do they seek fame, just like yourself. You possess the fighting power of one on universe god ranking list, but you are not on the list. You mean that there are many universe gods in a similar state to me in eternal chaotic world? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. Of course. In Sky Sword Prison itself, aren't there a dozen of them? King of Venomous Worms said. Jian Wushuang understood. After having a brief understanding of the experts in Sky Sword Prison, Jian Wushuang sighed with emotion. After all, Sky Sword Prison was created by the owner of Sky Sword Mountain, and the owner of Sky Sword Mountain already knew that I was a disciple of Star Palace, but still imprisoned me. He naturally isn't afraid of Lineage of Star, hence, even if Lineage of Star has already found out that I'm imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison, they won't be able to rescue me in a short period of time. Plus, I must take the best and the worst situation into consideration. I can't place all my hopes on Lineage of Star. I must also rely on myself. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain set a rule that, as long as I can kill 100 universe gods in the third heaven, or even 10 real gods, I can leave. That's also my way out. Jian Wushuang knew that there should be quite a number of universe gods and real gods who left from Sky Sword Prison for the past years. Of course, he wished that he was one of them. However, I have just arrived in Sky Sword Prison, and I am not at the top of the chain in power within Sky Sword Prison. It is impossible for me to kill 100 universe gods immediately and leave here. I can only take my time. Before that, I have to set foot in Sky Sword Prison steadily. Jian Wushuang clenched his fists. With his current ability, it wasn't difficult for him to keep his footing in Sky Sword Prison. After all, he possessed a divine body of real god level. His blood-killing plate armor had strong defense power too. As long as he didn't encounter any experts of the second and the first level, he shouldn't be in a life-threatening situation. Most importantly, compared to other experts in Sky Sword Prison, he was at an advantage. It was that he possessed soul power. His soul power coverage was wide, far beyond that of real gods. Once he launched his soul power, no matter which invisibility means one was using, one would be exposed. No matter who it was, once someone appeared around him, he could notice at the first instant and identify the person's power. If he were to come across anyone who was strong, and he was unable to deal with, he could totally avoid them. Then, Jian Wushuang was put in an advantageous position. He would be able to make trouble with others, but it was impossible for the others to surprise attack him. Just like when Luo Meng, who once surprise attacked him, Jian Wushuang had noticed him long ago. Let's begin. I shall see just how strong the prisoners in Sky Sword Prison are. With a tinge of excitement, Jian Wushuang started wandering in Sky Sword Prison. Sky Sword Mountain, under the 9 lofty sword mountains, there was a secluded cave dwelling. In the cave dwelling, there was a person carrying 3 long swords. A middle-aged man who was like an enduring, ferocious sword, sat there with his eyes closed. Suddenly, the middle-aged man's eyes shot open. The moment he opened his eyes, there was an explosion of sword intention. The middle-aged man waved his hand. Wow! The void before him became distorted, and there was another middle-aged man that appeared before him. Although the figure was blurry, Jian Wushuang could definitely recognize at the first glance that it was Hall Master Yuan from Lineage of Star. Chapter 1456 Misfortune. Chapter 1456 Misfortune. One of the 3 Hall Masters in Lineage of Star, Hall Master Yuan, who possessed extremely strong power in Lineage of Star, behaved rather humbly at that very moment before the middle-aged man. Mr. Tianjian, sorry to trouble you. Hall Master Yuan smiled. It's nothing. Don't mention it. The middle-aged man was the owner of Sky Sword Mountain. His voice was cold as he spoke. As you have requested, I imprisoned the young man in Sky Sword Prison following a matter of course. However, Sky Sword Prison is extremely dangerous, and it's impossible for me to keep an eye on him all the time. Hence, if the young man were to run into an accident in Sky Sword Prison, I would not be responsible. Of course, Hall Master Yuan smiled. You look like you are very confident in the young man. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain looked at Hall Master Yuan. If I were not confident, why would I dare to ask Mr. Tianjian to send him into Sky Sword Prison? Hall Master Yuan smiled as he replied. The others didn't know Jian Wushuang's direct line of descendants, but Hall Master Yuan did. He knew Jian Wushuang had cultivated Xianmia Golden Body and completed the first fraction. His divine body could be compared favorably with the real gods. Plus, he had defense treasure with him. In Sky Sword Prison, everyone's divine power was restrained. Hence, it wouldn't be easy to kill Jian Wushuang, whose defense power was so strong. Plus, he also knew that Jian Wushuang possessed soul power. It was one of the biggest advantages he had. With the two, as long as Jian Wushuang was careful and didn't catch the eye of the few top experts in Sky Sword Prison, he shouldn't be in too much danger. How long do you want me to imprison him for? The owner of Sky Sword Mountain asked. 10,000 years, Hallmaster answered. 10,000 years should give the young man enough experience in Sky Sword Prison. If he were to be lucky, he might already reach the criteria to leave Sky Sword Prison before 10,000 years. Achieve the criteria on his own? To kill 100 universe gods in the third heaven in Sky Sword Prison? The owner of Sky Sword Prison raised his eyebrows. If so, I will be rubbing my eyes in anticipation. Hallmaster Yuan smiled faintly, and then his blurry figure vanished into the cave dwelling. 10,000 years to achieve the criteria to leave Sky Sword Prison? Hee hee. I'd love to see if the young man from lineage of Star has the ability. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain sneered and closed his eyes. Jian Wushuang thought he was just unlucky that he had got imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison. He happened to be caught by the owner of Sky Sword Mountain right when he had killed universe god Mo Yen. He didn't know that it wasn't because he was unlucky that he got imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison, but because Hallmaster Yuan had intentionally arranged it for him. From Hallmaster Yuan's point of view, although Sky Sword Prison was dangerous, it was also a great place for training. In the prison, not only were there universe gods who possess fighting power of 1 on universe god ranking list, but there was also a large number of real gods. Especially as the real gods were restrained and could only carry out divine powers like a universe god in the third heaven, it was extremely valuable. In the outside world, Jian Wushuang, who was universe god, wouldn't have the chance to fight against a real god after all. However, there would be many chances in the Sky Sword Prison. Such a place was of course suitable for training. However, Jian Wushuang had no idea at all. He thought Hallmaster Yuan was negotiating with the owner of Sky Sword Mountain to get him out. However, Jian Wushuang never placed hope on other people. In Sky Sword Prison, in the vast Crimson Land, Jian Wushuang was plunging forward in the void. His soul power had spread around long ago and filled the surrounding region. He could see everything in the region. Jian Wushuang suddenly paused and looked towards a direction to one side. There was a bare mountain in the direction. It didn't look strange, but Jian Wushuang could see clearly with the coverage of his soul power. At the bottom of the mountain, there was an expert hiding. Purple-haired, carrying a saber, and there is a faint scar in between his eyebrows. Jian Wushuang could even see the characteristic of the expert's appearance clearly with his soul power, without the other person knowing. With his appearance and characteristics, Jian Wushuang immediately recognized the person. Wu Tsong of the 3rd level, an expert close to the top. He's good with a sword and created a real god unique skill. He's good in close combat, and possesses a secret skill of defense. His divine body is extremely strong too. Jian Wushuang recalled the information about the expert. The experts from 4 different levels in Sky Sword Prison. Putting aside the 4 kings from the strongest 1st level, although the other 3 levels of cultivators were of the same level, there was a difference in strength. Hence, there were top, intermediate, and low players at every level. Wu Tsong was of an intermediate standard of the 3rd level, close to the top. I just came to Sky Sword Prison, and I only fought for a short while with Luo Meng. But Luo Meng is only an expert from the 4th level, who had yet to create real god unique skill. He isn't my match, but Wu Tsong, I can give him a try. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly and went forward towards the bare mountain. Just as Jian Wushuang appeared in the void surrounding the bare mountain, the expert who was hiding in the cave dwelling at the bottom of the mountain, Wu Tsong, immediately lifted his head. This person looks very unfamiliar. I've never seen him before. A newcomer. Wu Tsong immediately understood, and he was beaming with joy. In Sky Sword Prison, newcomers were the easiest to kill normally. The experts who stayed in Sky Sword Prison for years had their measures to defend, and they knew one another's ability clearly. Hence, it was extremely difficult to kill one another. Wu Tsong saw Jian Wushuang, and he immediately had the intention to kill. He stopped. He's right above me. Did he notice me? Wu Tsong creased his eyebrows. Shouldn't be. My hiding skills are brilliant. Even when real gods pass by, they don't notice me if they don't probe carefully. Wu Tsong thought Jian Wushuang had happened to stop in the void above the mountain. But in actual fact, Jian Wushuang had locked him down via soul power long ago. Come out! In the void, Jian Wushuang's voice traveled through the mountain, layers of ground, into the cave dwelling and into Wu Tsong's ears. He really found me. Wu Tsong creased his eyebrows, but he didn't hesitate, and exited the ground directly. He appeared in the void above, before Jian Wushuang. Newbie, your consciousness senses are not too shabby. You can even notice my existence. Wu Tsong carried his saber behind his back, and he crossed his arms. He looked at Jian Wushuang with a malicious smile. Chapter 1457 Lesson. Chapter 1457 Lesson. Such a strong murderous intention. Jian Wushuang looked at Wu Tsong before him, and felt the terrifying murderous intention soaring from his body. His pupils contracted. In Sky Sword Prison, the massacring was crazy. There was no reason required to kill anyone. In the Mad Massacre, the experts in the prison had terrifying murderous intentions. Jian Wushuang flipped his wrist and Blood Mountain sword appeared in his hand instantly. Haha, I shall see just how powerful you are, newbie, and see if you can live in Sky Sword Prison. Wu Tsong laughed and suddenly his figure turned vague. Swoosh! A ghostly figure suddenly appeared before Jian Wushuang, and there was a green saber that swung out. So fast, Jian Wushuang was shocked. The expert information provided by Luo Meng highlighted that Wu Tsong was good with swords, and his close combat power was strong. It noted that his divine body was strong too, but there weren't any specifications on how fast his speed was. Then, the speed that Wu Tsong showed caught Jian Wushuang by surprise. The moment the blade light descended, Jian Wushuang transformed his divine power, and Blood Sword Mountain became a ray of crimson shadow to counterattack. Dang! There was a loud clash and the fierce strength spread. Jian Wushuang's figure shook faintly. Terrifying strength too. Although his divine power is only at the standard of a peak universe god in the third heaven, he has cultivated some kind of secret skill, and the secret skill increased his divine power, which seems to be stronger by a nose compared to mine. Jian Wushuang sighed. The next moment, the power of blood-killing plate armor erupted, and his strength increased tremendously. Swoosh! 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 Jian Wushuang's Blood Mountain sword swept out like a snake, and instantly pierced 5 holes in the void. However, Wu Tsong's figure moved around creepily, and dodged the 5 attacks easily. Then, there was green light flowing out from his body, that looked like a green dragon. Triple abrupt lightning. Wu Tsong held his saber with both his hands and slashed 3 times at lightning speed. The 3 slashes contained boundless power, just like 3 strikes of lightning that suddenly descended. Jian Wushuang immediately wielded his sword to withstand it. Dang! 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 There were 3 loud clashes and Jian Wushuang staggered backwards from the attack. Newbie, your power is only at such level. Wu Tsong stood there, and looked at Jian Wushuang with disdain. Jian Wushuang's face grew grave, and there was a sudden soaring sword intention from his body. A fierce divine power suddenly erupted. Wow! A sword light suddenly shined out. The sword light was like a frightened swan. It instantly disappeared. However, as it whistled, there was an extremely terrifying, shrill aura that swept past. Sword Principle Frightened Swan. It was created by Jian Wushuang after comprehending for 70 years under the 9 Sword Mountains in Sky Sword Mountain. It was the most ferocious stroke that Jian Wushuang had ever created. The moment he performed the stroke, Jian Wushuang immersed the slight bit of power of Heaven Wei that he had comprehended into the Sword Principle. The sudden explosion. Rank 3 strongest unique skill. Wu Tsong looked at the sudden stroke of Frightened Swan with a scornful look. Such a joke. Wu Tsong bellowed, and took a huge stride. His body was like a green dragon, while his blade was like a bolt of abrupt lightning. Walala! Boundless thunderous power swept out. Thunderous green dragon. Roar! There was suddenly a huge green dragon that plundered out from Wu Tsong's body. The green dragon immersed itself in the blade light, and the power of blade light instantly increased in power tremendously. The stroke was obviously a real god-unique skill that Wuxia had created. Suddenly, the two bolts of terrifying attack collided. There was a loud thud, and the sky sword prison faintly shook. What? Wuxia's facial expression suddenly changed. Jian Wuxia had only performed sword principle of rank 3 strongest unique skill, so he didn't bother much. After they collided, he felt an extremely strong power from the sword principle. The power was the power of Heaven Wei. Swoosh! Swoosh! Due to the impact, both Jian Wuxia and Wuxia staggered backwards. The frightened swan that Jian Wuxia had performed was only a rank 3 strongest unique skill after all. In terms of power, there was a huge difference compared to real god unique skill that Wuxia performed. However, due to the power of reincarnation, the two could be well matched. Young man, you're a newbie but you have already comprehended a slight bit of power of Heaven Wei. Wuxia's eyes were bloodshot red and obviously green with envy. One must know that he had been in Sky Sword Prison for almost 1,000,000 years. Through countless life and death situations, he had yet to comprehend even a slight bit of power of Heaven Wei. On the other hand, Jian Wuxia, who just come to Sky Sword Prison and had yet to experience a massacre in Sky Sword Prison, had already comprehended a slight bit of power of Heaven Wei. He was of course jealous. You comprehended a slight bit of power of Heaven Wei. Although you only created a rank 3 strongest unique skill, you are evenly matched with me. I can't kill you but I can teach you a lesson. Wuxia's face was cold. Teach me a lesson? Jian Wuxia was stunned, and then came back to reality. Swoosh! Wuxia's figure turned into a bolt of lightning, and leaped before Jian Wuxia. Then he slashed. Not only was he fast, but he was extremely ferocious too. Jian Wuxia immediately raised his sword to block. Just as he blocked the first slash, wow, 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 blade lights swept towards him like billowing waves one after another. Too fast, too ferocious. They were extremely strong. The terrifying blade light formed into an ocean and engulfed him. The explosion of Jian Wuxia's divine power reached his limit, and he wielded his sword to block. Right after he blocked the few blade lights, Wuxia's figure moved again in an unexplainable manner, and appeared next to Jian Wuxia again. His body became a saber, and hit Jian Wuxia, as though he was a slash by a saber. That very moment, not only his body but also his thighs, knees and arms were like sabers slashing with flexibility. Jian Wuxia was astonished. This is a close combat fight. It was close combat fight. The information that Luo Meng had provided him with highlighted Wuxia's ability with close combat skills. Although Jian Wuxia noticed it previously, he didn't expect that Wuxia's close combat skill would be that strong. His body was like a saber. Every part of his body that could be used for attack seemed to have turned into a saber. From the continuous attack, Jian Wuxia was suppressed. Although he had amazing power, he couldn't give play to his power at all, but he could only retreat. He was totally in a fix. Rumble! Wuxia's thighs were like the back of the saber. It broke Jian Wuxia's defense and hit his body. Then, Jian Wuxia's body immediately turned into a flowing light and erupted. Swoosh! Wuxia's body paused in the void. With a cold smirk, he looked at Jian Wuxia, who finally steadied himself from afar. That's enough teaching. I shall leave. Wow! Wuxia suddenly retreated, and also at lightning speed. Very soon he disappeared from Jian Wuxia's eyes. Chapter 1458 Training. Chapter 1458 Training. This. Jian Wuxia stood there as he watched Wuxia leave. He took a long time to calm himself down. Too strong. His close combat power is too strong. Jian Wuxia exclaimed. Really scary. He thought that he had fought with many experts ever since he started cultivation, and his close combat power wasn't that weak either. However, when he had fought with Wuxia, the match was dominated by one side from the outset. Wuxia was the one with the strongest close combat power among all experts that he had fought before. Such a terrifying close combat power. Why wasn't it emphasized in the information that Luo Meng gave? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows. From Luo Meng's information, the introduction about Wu Tsang had described his strong close combat power, but it didn't say just how strong it was. However, from Jian Wushuang's point of view, Wu Tsang's close combat power couldn't just be described as extremely strong. It should be described as terrifying. Unless most of the experts in Sky Sword Prison are good at close combat. Jian Wushuang thought. Oh, the people in Sky Sword Prison are always in a massacre. The massacre itself would increase one's close combat power tremendously, and the people here are imprisoned for very long. They'd figure out all the ways to increase their own power. They wouldn't even let the least bit pass. Close combat power is extremely useful during an actual fight. These experts definitely try their best to enhance their power. Naturally, all of them are good at it. Jian Wushuang understood. If it were to be a cultivator from the outside world, when they reached a bottleneck and found it difficult to break through, most of them would look for a chance and opportunity to improve. However, it was different in Sky Sword Prison. There wasn't any chance or opportunity, only merciless massacre. Hence, once their power reached a bottleneck, they could only figure out ways to improve things that they could improve on. It also led to the scenario where most of the experts in Sky Sword Prison were very good at close combat. Wu Tsang, who had fought with Jian Wushuang earlier, his close combat power wasn't at the top in Sky Sword Prison. In terms of power, Wu Tsang and I are about the same. However, he relied on his close combat power to suppress me. Of course, that was because I didn't perform any secret skills, nor use my soul power. Otherwise, he would be the one in a fix. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. His strongest fighting power was a flawless combination of sword principle and soul power. That was the true fighting power of one on Universe God ranking list. He merely used his sword principle, but he never used a soul attack. He had yet to even reveal his trump cards. The battle with Wu Tsang reminded me that my close combat power isn't strong. There are many experts in Sky Sword Prison, and most of them are good at close combat. With me wandering here, I could train my swordsmanship with the experts and simultaneously train close combat power. After all, there aren't many experts who would fight against me in the outside world. Plus, I have the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation with me. When I tried to comprehend it on my own blindly, the speed of improvement wasn't fast. But if I were to kill and train while I comprehend, the effect would be much better compared to before. Jian Wushuang then revealed a smile. In Sky Sword Prison, he saw the opportunity to train. An opportunity that he had never had anywhere else. Very soon, Jian Wushuang continued to wander in Sky Sword Prison. With the advantage of soul power, he wasn't worried that he would encounter much danger. After all, if he ran into anyone above the second level, experts who he couldn't provoke, he would avoid them. He could only fight with experts in Sky Sword Prison from the third or fourth level. Jian Wushuang had no intention of fighting with a real god in the third level either. After all, even the weakest real god in the third level, although they never once comprehended the power of Heaven Wei, their unique skill and secret skill were at a terrifying level. Even when their divine power was restrained, they weren't easy targets. Jian Wushuang planned to only fight against these real gods after he became stronger, or after he had created a real god unique skill. By then, he would really achieve the result of training. The time flew past. When Jian Wushuang had first came to Sky Sword Prison, not many of them knew. However, as Jian Wushuang continued to wander and fought against experts in the third and fourth level, the experts in Sky Sword Prison gradually got to know his existence. After all, although Sky Sword Prison couldn't be connected to the outside world, the experts in the prison could still communicate with one another freely. The messages weren't hindered. After Jian Wushuang fought many times, he was listed in the third level by many people's experts' information collection. He was listed as intermediate in the third level. Of course, Jian Wushuang wasn't there to train his swordsmanship and close combat power. Hence, he hardly used his soul power. If he were to use his soul power, he would be on the top in the third level. After the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had stayed in Sky Sword Prison for 170 years. In the 170 years, Jian Wushuang fought with many universe god experts of the 3rd and 4th level. There were victories and defeats. His swordsmanship and close combat power increased tremendously through the vigorous fighting, but it was a pity that he never once killed an expert in the 170 years. It wasn't because Jian Wushuang wasn't capable enough. It was because the experts in Sky Sword Prison had impressive survival skills. Even experts of the 4th level weren't easy targets to be killed. In Sky Sword Mountain, in the cave dwelling under the 9 lofty sword mountains, the middle-aged man sat. He was the owner of Sky Sword Mountain. He opened his eyes once again, after 170 years. Then, he glanced at the Sky Sword Prison, which was under his control. He could see Jian Wushuang in Sky Sword Prison clearly. Huh. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain lifted the corners of his lips and revealed a smile in disdain. It has already been 170 years. This young man from lineage of Star had yet to kill even one universe god in the 3rd heaven. Hee. Yuan said that this young man could kill 100 universe gods in 10,000 years and leave Sky Sword Prison with his own ability. From the look of things, that is just a joke. The owner of Sky Sword Mountain closed his eyes again. As he was at a high level, he was not bothered by the life or death of the prisoners in Sky Sword Prison. But then it was because of Jian Wushuang that he would pay more attention to Sky Sword Prison. Otherwise, he wouldn't bother to take a look at Sky Sword Prison, even once in a time span of tens of thousands of years. Chapter 1459, Universe God Long Xiao. Chapter 1459, Universe God Long Xiao. In Sky Sword Prison, in the depths of the forest, Jian Wushuang was sitting on a huge rock as he slowly opened his eyes. My soul's strength has reached the limitation of a universe god. There was a smile plastered on Jian Wushuang's face. For 170 years, when he was wandering in Sky Sword Prison, he was mostly fighting against experts to train his swordsmanship and close combat power. As for soul attacks, for 170 years, he had almost never used any soul attack. However, what Jian Wushuang had never expected was that even when he didn't intentionally improve his soul strength, it had reached the limit of a universe god's in the 170 years. At that level, it was already at the limit that a universe god could reach. Any higher would be the level of real god. Reaching such state, Jian Wushuang's soul attack would be a notch higher compared to before. Plus, in the 170 years, his swordsmanship and close combat power would improve tremendously. His overall power was one notch higher compared to before. The current me, if my full power were to be put into full play, out of the experts in the 3rd level in Sky Sword Prison, I would be at the top. I am even close to the 2nd level. It's a pity that I never created any real god-unique skills, and yet I can be compared favorably with the experts truly in the 2nd level. Jian Wushuang sighed. With the aid of the painting of understanding sword via reincarnation, his comprehension towards reincarnation doctrine improved tremendously too. However, to be truly evenly matched with the real gods who comprehended the power of Heaven Wei on the 2nd level, he still had a way to go. Continue to train. Jian Wushuang smiled, and soon continued his journey in Sky Sword Prison again. During his journey, although he had never once killed any universe god, he wasn't in a hurry. To him then, it was most important to continuously improve his power. As for the massacre, it wasn't time yet. In the cold void, there was a breeze blowing. Against one's body, it made one's heart cold too. Jian Wushuang, in a crimson robe and carrying his sword on his back, moved forward slowly as his soul power swept across. Jian Wushuang was shocked as he noticed a figure that appeared within the coverage of his soul sensory. It was a blonde-haired, brawny man. Even though he was far away, Jian Wushuang could feel the raging tyrannical aura in his body. The blonde-haired, brawny man reminded people of a ruthless lion. Universe God Long Xiao. There was a glimpse of light in Jian Wushuang's eyes, and he immediately plunged towards where the blonde-haired, brawny man was. In an instant, Jian Wushuang appeared before the blonde-haired, brawny man. If I'm not mistaken, you're Jian Wushuang who just got into Sky Sword Prison, right? The blonde-haired brawny man glared coldly at Jian Wushuang. I am. Jian Wushuang nodded. I've been wandering around Sky Sword Prison for 170 years, and I have fought many experts. However, it is my first time seeing you, Universe God Long Xiao. You knew my identity, but you have the guts to appear before me so frankly. You are very courageous, the blonde-haired brawny man Universe God Long Xiao said. Jian Wushuang smiled at his reply. However, he knew clearly that Universe God Long Xiao said so not because he was arrogant, but because he had the right to. Universe God Long Xiao. Among the experts in Sky Sword Prison, he was on the 3rd level, but he was at the top of the 3rd level. Plus, Universe God Long Xiao was widely recognized as the most annoying one by all universe gods in Sky Sword Prison. He cultivated an impressive secret skill in martial art motion. His martial art motion was known as the first in Sky Sword Prison. There was a rumor that he had once met one of the kings of the 1st level in Sky Sword Prison. The king took action against him, but didn't manage to kill him. One should know that the strongest in Sky Sword Prison was the 4 kings. Even the kings couldn't take care of him. Who else could kill him? Because so, although Universe God Long Xiao was only on the top of the 3rd level, he could move around Sky Sword Prison freely. Many experts on the 2nd level who met him would opt to detour without hesitation. But then, Jian Wushuang took the initiative when he found Universe God Long Xiao. That was why Universe God Long Xiao had complimented his courage. Jian Wushuang, you're just a newbie. You didn't find a place to hide, but wandered around to fight against experts. It seems that you are trying to train yourself using the experts in Sky Sword Prison. Now you took the initiative to look for me. Why? You want me to be one of your whetstones too? Universe God Long Xiao glared at Jian Wushuang. Haha, you live up to your reputation, Universe God Long Xiao. You could tell the purpose of my visit at first glance. However, the purpose of my visit is not only treating you as one of the whetstones, but also, if possible, I'd like to take your head. Jian Wushuang smiled and said. Universe God Long Xiao's face grew solemn. In Sky Sword Prison, only he would ask for trouble with the others and take their heads. Since when there was someone who would boast shamelessly that they wanted to take his head instead? You're asking for death. Universe God Long Xiao took action directly as he bellowed. He turned into a beast and a terrifying, raging aura spread. Wow, a simple charge, and there were 9 shadows that plunged from the void. The 9 shadows looked so surreal. This martial art motion. Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows as a shrill light flashed in his eyes. Behind, Jian Wushuang's soul power instantly locked onto his target, Universe God Long Xiao. He turned instantly and wielded Blood Mountain Sword smoothly. The soaring murderous intention of Universe God Long Xiao led to flowing golden light from his body. Both his hands turned into claws. Wow! 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 In the void, there were suddenly 3 golden claw marks. The 3 claw marks tore the void. Dang! 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 The claw mark collided with Blood Mountain Sword, and the impact exploded. Universe God Long Xiao went illusionary, and appeared in the 9 shadows again, while his real body appeared next to Jian Wushuang. His right index fingers were engulfed with intense golden light. The golden light was like a golden long spear aiming at Jian Wushuang's skull. Jian Wushuang shook and his arms moved in a creepy manner. The sword slashed and Universe God Long Xiao retreated. Universe God Long Xiao harumphed coldly. Suddenly, there were shadows in the surrounding void again. The shadows hemmed Jian Wushuang in, and they launched attacks at him simultaneously. Chapter 1460, The Only Weakness. Chapter 1460, The Only Weakness. There were a total of 9 illusionary figures that were hemmed in. They launched an attack simultaneously, waving their claws, landing heavy punches, or giving out brilliant lights from the tip of their fingers. Every single hit was real while Universe God Long Xiao's body moved swiftly among the illusionary figures and appeared in every corner, surrounding Jian Wushuang to perform a vital hit. Even Jian Wushuang found it hard to catch up with Universe God Long Xiu's martial art movements in terms of speed. He deserves to be acknowledged as the one with top martial art movement. Sky Sword Prison. That's so terrifying. Jian Wushuang exclaimed, but he was not anxious at all. Although he couldn't follow Universe God Long Xiu's martial art movements, his soul power had locked Universe God Long Xiu long ago. Regardless of how creepy Universe God Long Xiu's martial art movement was, Jian Wushuang could respond in time, and also could withstand Universe God Long Xiu's attacks. In the void, Jian Wushuang put his close combat power into full play. In collaboration with his swordsmanship and the power of reincarnation, he fought against Universe God Long Xiu face to face. Although he was playing defense, he never once looked in a fix. Bang! A loud thud, and the 9 illusionary figures surrounding Jian Wushuang suddenly dispersed, and Universe God Long Xiu's real body appeared somewhere far away. Jian Wushuang, the experts in Sky Sword Prison categorize you as an intermediate standard in the 3rd level. From what I can see, your power could be at the top of the 3rd level, and you could totally see through my martial art movement. That's rather impressive. Universe God Long Xiu said. He felt rather complicated at the bottom of his heart. He was fast and his divine body was extremely strong. His martial art movement was widely recognized as the top in Sky Sword Prison. However, his power was actually not too strong. He had only created an ordinary real god unique skill, and he had never once comprehended the power of Heaven Wei. His true power was merely at the intermediate standard of the 3rd level, but because of his terrifying martial art movement, he was listed at the top of the 3rd level. But then, Jian Wushuang saw through his martial art movement, so it was rather difficult for him to put his greatest advantage to full play. He naturally couldn't do anything about Jian Wushuang. It's a pity that I've never once understood the power of Heaven Wei. Otherwise, I would be confident of killing him. Universe God Long Xiu took a glance at Jian Wushuang and immediately shook his head. Jian Wushuang, you're lucky. See you again soon. Then, Universe God Long Xiu moved, and he retreated to the back. However, he had just started. Virum. A boundless blazing quicksand erupted. Suddenly, it covered the entire universe and engulfed Universe God Long Xiu within. When the blazing quicksand took effect, Universe God Long Xiu's speed was affected. He started frowning. Jian Wushuang, what are you trying to do? Universe God Long Xiu roared. What am I trying to do? Hehe, I told you earlier. If it's possible, I'd like to take your head down. You thought I was kidding. Jian Wushuang smiled and moved forward to him. Kill me? Haha, that's funny. The entire Sky Sword Prison, besides Heartless King, who was one of the 4 kings, who else could kill me? Jian Wushuang, I suggest that you stop wasting time. Universe God Long Xiu sneered at him. Only the Heartless King could kill you? Hehe, I'm sorry. From today onwards, there will be a second person. This person will be me. Jian Wushuang smirked. Universe God Long Xiu's face grew dim. Universe God Long Xiu, the reason you are afraid of Heartless King is that the Heartless King is good at consciousness attacks, right? Jian Wushuang's laughter continued to spread. He had read information about the 4 kings in Sky Sword Prison. Heartless King was one of them, and also the only real god who was good at consciousness attacks in the entire Sky Sword Prison. Universe God Long Xiu was extremely fast, and known to be the top in martial art movement. His divine body was extremely strong too. In terms of material attack, he had almost no weaknesses. Among the 4 kings, the other 3 were good at material attacks. Hence, they couldn't kill him. However, Universe God Long Xiu's consciousness wasn't strong. Compared to his divine body, speed, and martial art movement, his consciousness was his only weakness. Universe God Long Xiu, try to take this. Jian Wushuang's voice was heard again. At that very moment, there was a strong crimson light from his eyes. The crimson light was like a crimson sun, extremely harsh to the eyes. 18 Azura Hell descended directly. As Jian Wushuang's soul strength reached the limit of a universe god, the technique was even scarier than before. Although Universe God Long Xiu was back facing Jian Wushuang, As long as he was shined on by the crimson light, he would fall into a phantasmagoria. No. Universe God Long Xiu's expression grew grave. He who was trapped in dreamland immediately went insane and started struggling. Break! Break! Universe God Long Xiu bellowed in madness, and his consciousness was quivering. Actually, Universe God Long Xiu's consciousness wasn't weak. Among peak universe gods in the third heaven, it could be considered as impressive, and he was only one step away from the limit of a universe god. However, such a level of consciousness was obviously insufficient before Jian Wushuang. Rumble. Universe God Long Xiu was raging with anger, and his heart was extremely cold. Along with the bellow, he finally shook off from 18 Azura Hell. Before he could be surprised, he immediately saw a dark light before him. The dark light was actually a black long spear that gave out mysterious strength. The long spear appeared less than 1 meter away from her. At such a close distance, he wouldn't be able to dodge in time even if his martial art movement was amazing. He could only rely on his strong defense power to endure the black long spear. Clang! The black long spear hit his armor, which was transformed from the robe that he was wearing, and made a metal crashing sound, but didn't pierce it. Just as Universe God Long Xiu wanted to let out a breath of relief, he realized the terrifying power from the long spear had pierced through his sea of consciousness. It was an inextinguishable light that Jian Wushuang performed with his all. The inextinguishable light, with the support of the spear, was like a storm. It suddenly tore Universe God Long Xiu's consciousness into pieces. Universe God Long Xiu's consciousness slowly dispersed. Before he died, he seemed to look in disbelief and be unwilling to admit defeat. He never thought that when the other 3 kings in Sky Sword Prison couldn't kill him, he would die at the hands of a universe god. Besides, there was a look of relief in Universe God Long Xiu's eyes. Jian Wushuang stood there in silence as he watched Universe God Long Xiu fall. His eyes were cold. Being imprisoned in Sky Sword Prison, you and I have no choice but to seek our way out with our all. Before I kill you, I want to say that you have killed many other experts, so you can't blame me. Jian Wushuang muttered. Then, he appeared before Universe God Long Xiu's dead body. He took away Universe God Long Xiu's Qiankuan ring and the treasures on him. Then he immediately took a look inside the Qiankuan ring. Very soon, Jian Wushuang was beaming with joy. Found it. Universe God Long Xiu's secret skill of martial art movement, Flowing Light Phantom. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.